10. Dionysus, man. Dionysus was like never a dull moment. He literally exploded into existence after his mother Semele burst into pieces when Zeus showed her his true form because he was tricked by Hera. It's a whole thing. Then Zeus continued the gestation period by carrying him in his thigh. Ever since then, he took on the responsibility of being god of fertility, wine, winemaking, and madness. So essentially the party god, the frat boy of Olympus. However, some say that Dionysus was a result of a union between Zeus and Persephone, which is like even more confusing, but hey. It's a myth, so let's go. But the most famous story about him revolves around the Bacchae and the story interpreted by Euripides. Pentheus, the king of Thebes, banished the worship of Dionysus and forbade the women of the kingdom from participating in the Bacchus. You can bet frat boy wasn't happy about this. He doesn't like being banned. He cast a spell of madness on all the women of the kingdom to attend the festival. So Pentheus caught him somehow and imprisoned him, but you can't chain a god. Dionysus decided on his revenge. He transformed into an irresistibly beautiful woman and lured Pentheus to spy on the Bacchic rituals. When the Maenads spotted him, they thought he was a wild dog. Peeping Tom, more like. So they tore him limb from limb. One of the attackers was his mother, Agave, who didn't know the animal was actually her son in the madness that she was wrapped up in. So yeah, there are plenty more stories regarding this rascal, but this will have to wait for part 3. Number 9, Lysurus. We talked about Mira in part 1, you know, the woman who slept with her father and then turned into a tree from which she gave birth. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go watch part 1 right now. Yeah, weird times. Well, here is another plant story that's equally as confusing. I know branches can sometimes look like arms, but how do you confuse your son for one? Well, Dionysus has to be involved. Lysurus attacked and injured the aforementioned party god, Dionysus, and needless to say, the gods were not happy about it. Dionysus was basically doing a pub crawl with wine in the mortal realm, and Lysurus wasn't jazzed about it because he was a messy dude. As punishment, Dionysus descended upon him with madness. In this violent state, Lysurus saw a pile of weeds that he just had to get out of his garden, so he took an axe and chopped them away. Little did he know that it was actually his very own son that he was chopping to pieces. He also took the life of the rest of his family, and he even took off his own legs in his madness. After he finally passed away, he was entombed in a rock as a sign of disrespect for offending the gods. So, moral of the story, don't whine about the man of the vine, who likes to party all the time. Don't do it. Number 8. Hera the Virgin. The most confusing thing in all of Greek mythology was Hera and Zeus' marriage. Sometimes you just gotta know when it's time to call it quits. Between them being siblings, Zeus cheating on her all the time, Hera killing people over jealousy and spite, things were just messy. But did you know that Hera actually grew back her virginity annually? Not at all possible to rebuild that in real life, but if you're a god, then anything is possible. Hera was the goddess of virginity and was worshipped as the goddess of matrimony, virginity, and marriage. Though she was married, albeit unhappily, she was revered as a virgin, which clearly she wasn't. So in order to maintain this, she renewed her virginity every year by bathing in the spring of Canathus. The rites performed in order to do this were kept a secret and never spoken of, but she did it. This meant that people could still revere her for it, and she could pretend for a moment that Zeus and her never got jiggy with it, because obviously she'd want to forget that. After all, being a faithful wife to an unfaithful husband doesn't sound like a grand old time if you ask me.
But before infidelity, first comes love, then comes marriage, then comes creati, which will make you need a baby carriage. Why? Because when directly translated, creati literally means the bed. And if you don't already know about this tradition, you may want to consider adding it to your wedding festivities, Grecian background or otherwise. It's a Greek wedding tradition where friends and family of the bride and groom take time to decorate the marital bed. The tradition going back to ancient Greece dictates that single women should be doing this, but these days anyone's welcome to participate. The first stage is making the bed. In ancient times they quite literally built them a bed. Then they set up the bed with linens, bedspreads, pillowcases, and some simple set decorations such as throw pillows and flowers. At this stage the husband-to-be is called in to approve the bed. Once he does, more elaborate decorations are added. These ones are symbolic and intimate tokens, chosen to bless the marriage with luck, prosperity, love, and fertility. Rice is thrown on the bed to symbolize the process of putting down roots, and after people decorate the bed with any other festive elements like rose petals, jewels, and glitter. And since this cultural practice also felt a little ritually. Let's expand on those with godly sacrifices. Sacrifices were an ancient Greek custom that signified the solidarity and the communion between humanity and divinity. As the gods had once sacrificed for us, we now bestow that back onto them. However, the act of sacrificing demonstrates the difference between the natural world and the divine world. The sacrifice or offering was the heart of the ritual, the center of the whole process by ancient Greek customs. Sacrifices would be offered individually or by a group or community, and they were made in different places or sacred temples. To sacrifice as an individual is not so different from going to a church confessional. It's usually done as a plea for aid, comfort, and understanding, and this is simply how you were able to grab your gods' attention. Obviously, a lot harder than just closing the door and sitting down on a kneeler, so cut them some slack. Community sacrifice was usually done in sanctuaries, with priests doing the sacrificing alongside a prayer and a hymn. The animals that were sacrificed could be goats, lambs, pigs, chickens, and the latter being more of a modest offering, or it could be an ox, which was the most prestigious. Let's get dreamy again and disassociate while staring at some of Greece's most beautiful sculpture and stonework. Ah, beautiful. I can't believe statues like these used to be painted to look like Ronald McDonald. Wish I was kidding. Look at that. Met exhibit brings back color to ancient statues. We'll take it back off. It looks terrible. Anyways, as I'm sure you can tell from that sculpture you just saw, Greece from 800 to 300 BCE took heavy inspiration from Egyptian and Eastern monumental art, and over centuries evolved it into the uniquely Greek vision. Greek artists reached a peak of excellence which captured the human form in a way that had never been seen, particularly concerned with proportion, poise, detail, and the idealized perfection of the human body. Their figures in stone and bronze have become some of the most recognizable pieces of art ever produced. Greek architects provided some of the most distinctive buildings in the ancient world, some of which would become staple features in their towns and cities, surviving through conquerships, battles, and dark ages all the way to modern times, where they remain protected by organizations such as UNESCO. Their architecture would go on to greatly influence the Roman world and the foundation for classical architecture, which would dominate the Western world from Renaissance to present day. Here's a cute little cultural nugget: the Martis. Spring has come! The name of March derives from this ancient tradition, which dates back to the cult of Demeter and Persephone. As a form of initiation to the cult, the Usilians, the faithful wore a bracelet called a croci on both their right hand and left ankle. Amazingly, the tradition still lives on today in modern Greece to celebrate springtime coming. Everyone, regardless of age, adorns themselves with the bracelet. However, there are certain rules that one must abide when creating and wearing the symbolic bracelet. It must be woven on the last day of February, worn from March 1st until the last day of the month, March 31st, and it must be made of white and red thread, the white symbolizing purity, the red symbolizing life and passion. In ancient times, people believed that the bracelet helped protect the person who was wearing it from diseases, as well as the strong rays of the spring sun during the month of March. Part of the ancient Greek tradition calls for the person wearing their red and white Martis bracelet to take it off and tie it to the first flowering tree they see in March in order to yield a healthy harvest. Another lovely tradition that the Greeks practice is that when they see the first swallow of spring, the first person who sees the swallow upon the bird's return from the winter migration ties their bracelet around the nearest rose bush to encourage the bird to make a nest there. And I can't bring up the Ulysilians without diving into ancient Greece cult culture. These ancient mysterious cults were based on sacred stories that often involved ritual worshipping of a death rebirth myth of a particular divinity. In addition to the promise of a better afterlife, these small sect groups fostered social bonds among the participants. Hilariously, like today, initiation fees and other contributions were also expected to the cult. I love it. Mystery cults continue to vex scholars because the evidence is minimal, comprising of a few written sources, mostly later in date, and often with questionable aims and biases. Cults like the Sabazios, which originated with the Philgarians and the Thraticans, were also known in Greece by the 5th century BCE, but they have no surviving stories, only brief historical references saying that his initiatives practiced ritual serpent handling. Dionysus's cult believed in primitive power accessible through wine's ability to lower inhibitions. We know his cult rituals were usually drunken group romps, the playing of bull roars, and the sacrifice of animals using a double-headed axe, followed by the drinking of their blood mixed with wine. The Dionysians eventually evolved into the Orphics, which were established around the 5th century BCE. And what do cults, gods, and the everyday citizen have in common? They love a good raging festival. The ancient Greeks had hundreds of festivals that were celebrated in various regions throughout Greece and during different periods of their history. Festivals were thrown at any given opportunity, seeing as they had had many exuberant emperors and a pantheon of demanding gods, they were pretty frequent. But not all were made equal. The Adonia was a festival that took place in the middle of summer exclusively by women. They would climb up on ladders on the roof of their houses, plant fast-growing plants like lettuce or fennel, and then leave these gardens in the hot sun so plants would sprout and wither immediately, symbolizing the life of Adonis, cut short. Then they would make a spectacular display of mourning by screaming, beating their chests, tearing their clothes off, while hurling an effigy of Adonis and all the dead plants into the sea. The Erephoria was an ancient Greek festival that was celebrated in Athens during the 5th century BC. Two young Athenian girls are selected to carry special object-filled baskets on their head down a natural underground passage leading from the temple of Athena Polias to the shrine of Aphrodite. They would leave the baskets there without looking at them, receive another set of mysterious objects in baskets, carry those bad boys back, and give the mystery baskets to the priestess of Athena. According to Pausanias, no one was allowed to know what was in the basket, no one ever looked, even the priestess had no idea. Obviously, ancient Greece has shown itself to be a culture of wonkiness, ingenuity, creativity, and our last point, intellectual risk takers. Ancient Greek technology developed during the 5th century BC, continuing up and including the Roman period and beyond. Inventions that were credited to the ancient Greeks include the gear, screw, rotary mill, bronze casting techniques, and the use of steam to operate some experimental machines and toys. Oh, and a chart to find prime numbers. Many of these inventions occurred in the later Greek period, often inspired by the need to improve weapons and tactics in warfare. Geometry is without a doubt one of the oldest branches of mathematics. However, the Greeks were the first to insist that geometric facts must be established by deductive reasoning. Thales of Midas, regarded as the father of geometry, set up a number of axioms and rules in the 6th century BCE. Their approach to philosophy was a way of understanding the world around them without resorting to religion, myth, or magic, and it changed how we viewed the world. Early Greek philosophers were also scientists who observed and studied everything known, its seas, the mountains, as well as the solar system, planetary motion, and astral phenomena. Aristotle gave us the idea that Earth was a globe. He also classified animals and is referred to the father of zoology. Theophrastus was the first known botanist we know of written in history, and the Pythagoreans not only made the earliest advancements in philosophy and geometry, but they proposed the heliocentric hypothesis with Earth revolving around the sun. Suffice to say, the most fed culture of ancient Greece was that of the mind.
Number 10, Pandora's Box. I don't understand. Why would you even have a box like this in the first place? According to Greek mythology, the beginning of the earth was free of pain and suffering. The land was perfect, kind of exactly like Eden. Prometheus had created man by making them out of clay, and he will... Okay, well, we might get to that later in another list, but you know, he did a whole bunch of good things for man, the gods got mad. Anyways, Hephaestus made the first woman, Pandora. They gave her beauty, cleverness, charm, and curiosity. Curiosity killed the cat. Her name translates to all gifted. But then Zeus was like, you know what would be a great gift? I'm gonna give this girl a box and tell her not to open it. That's like putting a B-Day present in a 4-year-old's lap and being like, ooh, enjoy the wrapping. No. Well, guess what happened? Because they gave her curiosity, it got the best of her, and she released all the troubles into the world: disease, violence, madness, greed, old age, death, plague, slow walkers, and people who eat really loud at the movies. Okay, the last thing to leave was hope, so at least that's a good thing. But you gotta wonder, who in the heck let Zeus be the leader of everything if he made a crap decision like that, with no foresight at all? Why put that stuff in a box? I don't know. Stop it. You're fine. Number 9. Echo and Narcissist. Look, there's nothing wrong with doing a fit check before you leave for work. Give yourself like a, ooh, damn, you know? Do that. Love yourself. But if you're stuck there for the whole day, there's a thing called being a narcissist, which is derived from a character in Greek mythology named Narcissus. The love story between Echo and Narcissus is a curious one, which makes very little sense. Echo was a beautiful nymph who was cursed by Hera when she tried to protect Zeus from getting caught because he was swing. She was now only allowed to say the last word anyone said, hence Echo. Echo was just one of many who pursued Narcissus, but her love was deep and true. One day, as she waited for him to say the last word, she finally went to him when he called her. Immediately, he spurned her off, saying like, no one's better than me, so get out of here, you nymph. You called her, dude. The goddess Nemesis wasn't pleased with his behavior, so she decided to punish him. Nemesis lured him to a steady pool of water where he spotted the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. himself, and he fell passionately in love. Stung by the pangs of unrequited love at last, Narcissist took his own life rather than live without being able to touch himself. Moving on. Number 8, King Midas. Whoever used the term Midas touch and thought it was a good thing needs to read the story again. The Midas touch is an allusion to King Midas, who thought having the power to turn everything into gold was gonna be a good thing, but he didn't specify, and there's always a catch. There's always a catch. After Midas welcomed with open arms Dionysus's merriest reveler, Dionysus said he would give him one wish. He wished to turn everything he touched into gold, because he needed money. He was delighted at first, turning twigs and plants to gold, but then when he got hungry, he found he couldn't eat or drink anything without it turning into gold. Panicking, his daughter ran towards him to comfort him. Out of instinct, he hugged her back because he was a hugger. She soon turned into gold. Dionysus heard his curses and prayers and told him he must wash himself in the river Procrustes. Now, whether everything turned back to normal is debatable. Some stories say they did, others didn't, so there is some confusion there, but either way, Midas learned to appreciate all the things around him as opposed to wanting more. Morals. Number 7, Skyron. I don't know about you, but if someone washed my feet for me, the first thing I would do would say, thank you. Full stop. Like, that's it. The last thing I would do is blast them off a cliff with said clean toesies. Already there are a few things I never thought I would say to thousands of people. But what a great intro to the story of Skyron. Skyron was a bandit who was obsessed with killing people after and while they washed his feet. Everybody's got their thing, I guess. He would call travelers on the road to help him wash his feet, which a surprising amount of people agreed to do, right? Imagine someone asking you to do that today. You just hear a voice pleading from a dark alley to like, please wash my feet, wash my feet. I need someone to wash my feet. Would you go? Serious question. Anyways, when these extremely kind people would offer help, he would kick them in the face and push them over a cliff. Yeah. To add insult to injury, at the base of the cliff was a man-eating tortoise who would eat the remains of the either dead or still alive people. Talk about kicking a man while they're down. He got away with this too many times. Imagine the parents having to warn their kids not to wash random people's feet. Thankfully, Theseus, Poseidon's son, butted in and threw him off the very cliff he so enjoyed in his pastime. I like how the crime fits the punishment here, you know? It's satisfying. I like it. It's good storytelling. Number 6, Tyus, Procrustes, and Philomela. Okay, this one is probably the most messed up out of all the Greek tales, at least in my book. Trigger warnings galore here, folks. I'll try to be delicate. Tyus was the son of Ares and the king of Thrace. He married Procrustes, who was the eldest daughter of Pandion, the king of Athens. The two fell fast in love, but the Furies prepared their marriage bed and howled all night over their union. A very, very bad omen. Soon Procrustes longed for her little sister Philomela to join her, so Tyus went to fetch her from Athens. But as soon as he saw her, he was consumed by lust. Despite promising her father he'd protect her, he stole Philomela away and ravaged her. She promised she'd tell everyone what he did, so in order to stop that from happening, he cut out her tongue. He hid her away and told Procrustes that she'd been lost at sea and perished. For a year, Philomela snuck cloth from the maid that would care for her and wove a tapestry that told her story. The maid secretly brought the cloth to Procrustes and she immediately sought out her sister. Fueled by rage, she took her revenge. She stole the life of their own son, Itis, and fed him to Tyus for dinner. When he called for him, Procrustes revealed her sister and pointed to the stew that the king had finished. Tyus flew into a rage and gave chase, but the two women changed into birds to evade him. Birds. Okay. Procrustes turned into a swallow, Philomela a nightingale, and Tyus soon followed suit by the ravenous hoopoe bird. Would have thought it would be like a raven or like a hawk, but nope, he got the hoopoe bird. Okay. Number 5, Cersei and the pigs. Cersei wasn't so much considered as much a goddess, though she was one, more like a witch or an enchantress. She was the daughter of Helios, and depending on your sources, she was also the daughter of Hecate. This story is confusing because no one can really define whether she was the villain of the story or just like sad and lonely. The story goes as follows. The great hero Odysseus and his crew, after months at sea, happen upon her island. He sends his men ashore to investigate and find a cottage surrounded by magnificent magnificent yet docile beasts. Cersei is heard singing, and when the men greet her, she invites them in for a hearty meal, and after months at sea, that's amazing. Unbeknownst to them though, the food is enchanted and the men all turn into pigs. Odysseus discovers this, and after Hermes places a protective charm on him, he confronts her. Her charms were powerless on him because of Hermes, so she invited him into bed instead. Yeah, sure, why not? This is also out of character for Odysseus because he was super in love with his wife back home, but I guess he couldn't say no because she was a goddess, and hey, sexy times. Cersei realizes who he was, and having been foretold that Odysseus would be the only man to resist her, she lifted the curse on the men. She also made them hotter in the process, as a like, I'm really sorry. And then they all stayed for a year because I guess why not? They just stayed for a year. I don't know why. When they decided to finally leave, Cersei ended up giving him a bunch of info to protect him, so I guess like she turned into a friend after all. And yeah, it's just weird. Why would you stay on an island that turned you into pigs? I don't know, do you? Number 4, Hercules holds a giant off the ground. The taller you stand, the farther you have to fall. A lesson the tall people of the world will understand. As a requirement for the 12 trials of Hercules, our great hero had to defeat a massive giant. This ginormous form was named Antaeus, an undefeatable immortal so long as his feet remained on the ground. His mother was Gaia, the goddess of the earth, so like all his powers came from her. Duh. Antaeus was a big fan of wrestling, he loved it, and Hercules was a big strong guy, so they went at it. But in order to defeat him, all Hercules had to do was lift him off the ground and wait until his power drained from him, and that was that, because if he threw him on the ground, he would just like regenerate. So that sounds more like a prolonged piggyback than wrestling, but you know, whatever gets the job done. Good for you, buddy. And coming up to our top 3, we have number 3, Procrustes. Theseus dealt with a lot of interesting characters, and Procrustes was exactly how his name sounds. Crusty. If you ever find yourself wrapped up in a scheme designed to enforce uniformity by violent methods, then you may use the term Procrustean bed to adequately describe it. Procrustes was a serial taker of lives who had a very special bed. He would, like Skyron, soothe very weary travelers into a false sense of security by offering them a bed to stay for in the night. However, if you didn't fit on the bed, which no one did, he would either violently stretch you or trim you, to put it delicately, so that you would fit the bed. Obviously, all the travelers ended up dead. The notorious criminal lived between Athens and Ulysses, so coming across travelers was pretty easy. It was just a matter of time before Theseus would encounter him and set the record straight. Having heard of his crimes, Theseus decided to turn the tables and make Procrustes fit his own bed. So, what's even more confusing about this story is that Procrustes was the son of Poseidon, and so technically was Theseus' brother, so in a way, Theseus kinda committed fratricide, but Procrustes wasn't really behaving with godlike intentions, so I'm not sure where you can draw the line there. Number 2, Tantalus and Pelops. This one. Considering Tantalus was in such good rapport with the gods, I'm not sure why he did this. As we know, being on the gods' bad side even slightly leads to some pretty harsh punishment, so imagine really being on their bad side. Tantalus was the king of the land that is now Turkey today, and the gods thought he was just swell. So great, they'd even visit him from time to time for dinner. That sounds pretty good, man. Maybe they were awful dinner guests or something, but eventually Tantalus wanted to see how far he could push his luck. He devised a test that would determine whether the gods were all-knowing. He could have been like, how many fingers do I have behind my back? He could have been like, how many apples are in my dungeon? He could have done something random like that, but instead he did the last thing you would think of. Tantalus killed his son Pelops, cooked him up, and served him for dinner. Of course, the gods were wise to it as soon as they sat down, and considering a father eating his children was a pretty sensitive topic, Kronos, they were not pleased. The only god who ate some of Pelops was Demeter, who was blinded by grief over the loss of her daughter Persephone because she was downstairs with Hades. Needless to say, they were pissed. Zeus threw Tantalus into the abyss of Tartarus to endure an eternity of torment. His punishment was to spend the rest of time waist deep in water with a fruit tree hanging above him. Each time he went to take a drink, the water receded, and every time he went to take a bite of the fruit, the wind would blow it off course. However, as soon as he stopped lunging for it, everything would return back to normal and tempt him even further. Happy ending for Pelops though, since Demeter ate part of him, they brought him back to life, and he was turned into ivory. Pretty good. Pretty good for him. Number 1, Endymion. This story isn't exactly linear, so it remains one of the most confusing tales because it was likely pieced together. The issue for historians is that no complete story exists of it today, but we know it's about the love between the goddess of the moon, Selene, and a human man. In some versions he was the son of Thelius, others say he was raised by him, but was actually the son of Zeus. Some say he was a shepherd, others a king, but either way, this guy spent a lot of time outside at night beneath the moon. Sometimes he would even stay up all night charting the path of the moon, ignoring the desire to sleep. Soon Selene fell deeply in love with Endymion, a strikingly handsome mortal man. Selene could no longer ignore her desire and decided to visit her love, abandoning the sky altogether. Softly, gently, she crept up upon him to avoid frightening him, but the two were swept away by the throes of love, but her adoration distracted her from her duties. In addition to that, Endymion was mortal, meaning their love would be short-lived in his mortal life. So Zeus, either for punishment or pity of Selene, put her lover into a deep frozen sleep so that she may always see her love as a young man. But little more is known actually if that was punishment or pity. But hey, it's kind of beautiful.
Number 10, the bird. To flip somebody the bird, or to flip somebody off in general, of course this means to give them the middle finger. But do we even know why we do this? It's automatic, right? You lose in Mario Kart, you throw it up. Why? Why do we do it? I don't recommend it, first of all, because obviously you're gonna get in a heap of trouble afterwards, whoever's on the receiving end of that bird. Said bird is gonna sail, and it's gonna be upset, whoever gets it. But giving somebody the middle finger comes from 4th century BC Athens. Yes, thank you so much. I love this invention, if you wanna call it that. The philosopher Diogenes expressed how he felt to visitors about Demosthenes. Now, he described his distaste by putting up a middle finger. Now, the idea here was that it was a phallic gesture. Yeah, the middle finger is supposed to be, you know, your and the surrounding curled fingers are meant to represent the you-know-whos, right? We're talking about, yeah, I can't say what I want to say, but we're starting this list off on a great note, aren't we? Number 9, Thermopylae. Our next stop is the coastal passage of Thermopylae in Greece, also known as the Hot Gates back in 480 BC. Now, this was a beautiful stage for a battle that became a symbol of courage against overwhelming odds, and also became a Zack Snyder movie, which is pretty cool, I guess. Under the rule of King Xerxes, the Persian Empire sought to conquer Greece. Outnumbered, a small alliance of Greek city-states led by King Leonidas of Sparta, they resisted. They said, nope, not on my watch. So about 7,000 Greeks faced an estimate 100,000 to 150,000 Persians. Now, the Greeks used the narrow terrain to their advantage, right? They knew this. They funneled the Persian forces and then they held them there for 3 days straight. But on the 3rd day, something happened. On the 3rd day, a local resident betrayed the Greeks, how dare thee, showing the Persians a mountain path that led behind Greek lines. Now, Leonidas was aware of his doomed fate. He dismissed the bulk of his army and remained with, you guessed it, 300 Spartans and a few hundred others to fight to the death. Now, although the Persians ultimately won, the Greeks' heroic stand at Thermopylae allowed the city-states time to prepare for the Persian onslaught that followed. It has since been an enduring symbol of bravery and sacrifice in the face of overwhelming odds. And again, Zack Snyder saw this. He's like, cha-ching, let's do it. A lot of abs. Paint those abs on. Number 8, Column Wars. So while the Greeks were going head-to-head with the Turks, they were fighting over their independence. Now, the Greeks had the upper hand at the Acropolis one day. They were surrounding their enemy. Everything was going great. They had this stronghold in their grasp. And the Turks, at the same time, were running out of ammo and, of course, options. They then began to break apart the marble columns around them. Yeah, just smashing them to bits like it's Minecraft, just to try and get lead from inside. Now, as the Greeks witnessed the destruction of their Parthenon, they panicked. They were like, please stop. They said, here, take our ammo instead, but don't break our columns. And they did. They took their ammo, continued the war, the 1821 Greek War of Independence. Yeah, here you go, Ottoman Empire. Take this lead. Now we can fight. Let's do it officially. I'd be like, take the columns. We're getting out of here. Peace.
Number 7, Datus and Icarus. We all wanted to jump off the roof when we were kids with wings made from paper to see if we could fly. I mean, why not? Massive metal planes are able to do it. Why can't we? Literally, planes are insane. Side note, Because science, that's why. But with stories like Datus and Icarus, a part of me still thinks it could work as long as you don't fly too close to the sun. Daedalus was a master inventor who designed the maze for King Minos' palace. He, along with his son, built it together, but the king tricked them and trapped them inside. Daedalus was said to have earned his skills from Athena herself, and soon he fashioned a pair of wings with wax and quills. Soon father and son were able to flee, but Icarus ignored his father's warnings of flying too close to the sun, otherwise the wax on the wings would melt. Soon this happened and Icarus crashed into the sea and died. It's a marvel that the wings worked in the first place, but it's even more of a miracle that they evaded the Minotaur, who was, like, by the way, inside the maze that they built for it. Also, no one explained how they broke out of the maze in order to get into the air into the first place, so I'm not sure how all this worked. If my parents said I couldn't jump off the roof with fake paper wings, then it only makes sense that this would fail, I guess. Number 6, Apollo and Daphne. Ever had someone like not get the hint and continue to slide into your DMs? So in order to avoid them, you like have to turn into a tree so they leave you alone? Ha! Anyways, yeah, me too. It's a tough place to be, especially in the case of Apollo and Daphne. Apollo made the massive mistake of making fun of the god Eros, who, you know, the guy with the arrows that make people fall in love, Cupid. Well, in order to mess with him, he shot a golden arrow at Apollo, causing him to fall desperately in love with the nymph Daphne, and at the same time, Eros struck Daphne with a lead arrow, causing her to detest the god. Apollo pursued her with such fervor that Daphne eventually got exhausted running away from him, so she prayed to the river god Peneus to rid him from her. So she sacrificed her physical form and transformed into the laurel tree. Desperate measures, folks. Apollo was so distraught, he made her his sacred plant and always wore stems of the laurel tree on himself, which means he would have had to break them off the branches. Which, if you're thinking about that, did Daphne feel that as a tree, you know? Did he just keep causing her more and more pain? Ugh. Number 5, Chiron. I think the last video or the video before, I don't know, my brain is pretty scrambled, but I mentioned the story of how Ixion made love to a cloud and gave birth to half horse, half men people. Yeah, well, as confusing as that is, like, where did those genes come from? Chiron was an exception to the rule. He was the son of the bond between Titan Cronus and a nymph and became a kind of honorary god. Unlike his other horny relatives, Chiron was a trusted, artistic, and intelligent being. He was still part horse, but his front legs were still human. So I guess imagine a man wearing half of those like 2-men horse costumes. Yeah. He didn't play the field, really, but was married to a nymph named Charicolo and had 3 daughters and a son. He trained fantastic heroes such as Achilles, Jason, Perseus, Ajax, and Hercules or Hercules. But his most noble act was giving up his mortality in order to free Prometheus. As a reward for his sacrifice, he became a fantastic constellation in the sky. Number 4, Delphine. The most confusing thing about Delphine is actually what she was supposed to be. A python, a dragon, and some ancient accounts equate her with Echidna, the mother of all monsters, a half woman, half snake being. She has also been confused for a male serpent, but according to the earliest Homeric hymn, she was a girl dragon. Anyone get that reference? No? Okay, moving on. There are quite a few different accounts of the goddess, and descriptions of her aren't really consistent, but we do know that she was a dragon type thing born from Gaia, the Greek goddess of earth. Her name means womb, and only us ladies really understand why a womb would be depicted as a dragon. The time of the month, I know. Delphine was given the charge of guarding the Oracle of Delphi. For some reason, Apollo really wanted to control it, so Delphine and him went head to head on several occasions. He eventually slew her with his bow, allowing him to take control, so unfortunately that happened. But hey, he's a god. Number 3, Medusa. The origin of her story has a few versions, but no matter what way of getting there, she ends up as a gorgon. Her hair full of snakes and armed with a petrifying gaze, Medusa is one of the most prominent figures in Greek mythology. The story of Medusa has come under some confusion recently. Some say that the god of Poseidon took her without consent, violating her oath to Athena, and therefore the goddess punished her. Some say it was consensual, some say that she just insulted Athena somehow, but this is the most popular story. Medusa, as a mortal woman, was said to be the most beautiful woman in the world, but remained an enchanting and steadfast priestess for Athena. Though at first Athena was proud of her subject, she became irritated that the people were only at the temple to see her, because she was fire. Poseidon didn't like Athena because she won Athens, so he tried to seduce the young maiden to get her angry. She refused because she's awesome and ran to the temple and prayed to Athena for protection, which the goddess gave her none, so Poseidon took her anyways. Athena punished her, saying it was her fault, though like, obviously it wasn't. Where the heck were you, Athena? Bad move. You'd think Athena would be half decent in this situation, but guess not. So she turned her into this ferocious Gorgon, and then on the way out of the temple she ran into her best friend and turned him into stone and a whole bunch of other people. It's a really sad story. She wasn't a monster. I don't think so anyways. Number 2, Pygmalion and Galatia. We talked about Narcissist, and this story is kind of in the same vein. Like, you know, you fall in love with your own work of art. The world is wide and strange, and people marrying cars and objects is actually far from myth. It's actually happened, but like why? How? No clue. Which brings us to the strange tale of Pygmalion and Galatia. Pygmalion was a sculptor and carved incredible lifelike ivory creations. His dedication to his craft left him no time for love, and even swore to a life without wedlock. But this longing one day manifested in a statue he carved of a woman of unparalleled beauty. He could not take his eyes off his creation and named her Galatia. He clothed her, decorated her, kissed her. The guy was obsessed. The festival of Aphrodite was approaching, and he prayed and prayed she would come to life so he could marry her. Aphrodite, upon seeing the sculptor, was awestruck by her beauty and agreed. As you can guess, though unlike most Greek love stories, they lived happily ever after, which is unfamiliar for the Greeks, honestly. So many tragic stories. Greek tragedy is a thing. Number 1, last but not least, Io and Zeus. Yet another reason to be wary of clouds. I honestly don't know how the gods made love via vapor, but some things we will just never know. Io was a follower of Hera, and Zeus, upon seeing her one day, fell hard in love, or in lust. Depends. She constantly avoided his lustful attempts until one day Zeus decided to take what he wanted by surrounding her as a cloud and making love to her. Without consent. Which is, for some reason, a word I can't say on YouTube, but you get the point. Hera figured that out, turned her into a white cow because she was mad, tied her to an olive tree, and had her guarded by a 100-eyed dog. Zeus then sent Hermes to get rid of him, which he did, but then Hera released the cow Io and plagued her with madness as she wandered around. While wandering, she met the poor titan Prometheus, who was cursed to have his liver torn out every day, and he comforted her by saying that she would one day return to her human form and bear a child by Zeus that would someday release him. Zeus caught up with her in Egypt, turned her back to human form, then her descendant, like 11 generations later, Hercules, released Prometheus from his chains. But wait, I thought that was Chiron. What?
Number 10. The classic. Alexander the Great is probably the most infamous person on this list. Shout out again to my late 90s PC gamers, but because of Age of Empires and Civilization games, you are probably familiar with old Alexander, one of the great conquerors of ancient times. So what does that mean exactly? Well, the man wasn't asking for land with please and thank you. He was asking with a spear and a shield, sort of style. And by asking, I mean just taking. However, for the brutal, handsome young king of many lands, his time to bask in his empire was short-lived, as he died soon after Persia was conquered. His achievements cannot be understated, however. Conquering so much at such a young age was very impressive, comparative to the mythological Achilles in grandeur. Number 9. A man in his barrel. This is going to be very difficult to talk about, simply because I find the premise of this to be comedy gold. Okay, close your eyes. Imagine ancient Greece. A city like Athens is populated with the wealthy in gowns and robes, and maybe even a stereotypical toga. Buildings of white stone and marble. A market bustling with people haggling for fresh produce and cloth. Perhaps even a fountain with some flowers. Beautiful, isn't it? However, just around the corner, not too far from the town square, there's a barrel. A barrel that's shaking vigorously. And what is causing this barrel to shake? Well, that would be the man who lives in it, Dionis. Yes, a philosopher who was self-gratifying himself in a barrel in public. Diogenes defended his behavior by saying how he wished it was as easy to relieve hunger by rubbing an empty stomach. Yeah, I was sitting in my study earlier when a courier handed me a letter. I opened the letter in a warm candlelight glow. It was from the chief. And he said that's not it. Number 8, trendsetter. As if doing what Diogenes did in public wasn't bad enough, and I mean, come on, that's pretty scandalous, he also would commonly defecate in public theaters and urinate on those he found annoying. Sure, maybe major cities need people like this. I mean, come on, would New York City really be New York City if crazy people don't yell at you on the streets all the time? Huh? Diogenes just may have been the first to do such crazy things. Also, I'd like to argue his philosophy. If you just give me a moment, if he pees on people who are annoying him, could the people that are being peed on not deem that annoying and then do the same in return? I'm not a smart guy like the Greek leaders, but at least I know how to use a washroom. Just saying.
Number 7, zombies? Question mark. Yeah, it doesn't matter the context. Zombies are always scary wherever you drop them in history or culture. Whenever we talk about ancient Egyptians, we break down the process of mummification, and that I miss. Just keep everything in jars, keep everything separate, safe in the middle of a tomb. No zombies coming back to life here. No way, Jose. Well, ancient Greeks, they actually believed in zombies in some way, shape, or form. They had steps that they would take to prevent the dead from ever walking again, which is, okay, terrifying to say out loud. Archaeologists found graves where bodies were actually weighed down with rocks, or they'd be pinned down to their tombs, again, to prevent them from leaving after death. Why is that? Why are you doing that? They weren't called zombies at the time, obviously, but rather they were called revenants. Reanimated corpses that returned to terrorize the living. Nice, sounds a lot like a zombie, doesn't it? Yeah, I agree. Dr. Solosky Weaver explains that bodies found at a cemetery near the ancient town of Camarina in the southeast Sicily, they were feared to come back to life. So the town was once a Greek colony, of course now modern day Italy, but it's home to a 3rd century cemetery with around 3,000 bodies. And more than half of them were buried with coins. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend digging up anything, but just know there's some treasure and zombies possibly lying around you at every waking moment. Cheers. Number 6, stone cold. When the pandemic first began, one of the hardest things to get a hold of was toilet paper. I don't know, everyone decided to their pants or something all of a sudden. It was chaos for no reason. It's pretty important, I guess. When you run out of toilet paper, you often remember that moment for a little while. Regardless of where you are, you'll remember that forever. Start looking around for towels and props. You're like, all right, how am I gonna get out of this sticky situation? Leaves of 3, let them be. That's all I'm saying. But ancient Greeks, they did things a rougher way. Ancient Greeks would use these small ceramic pieces to wipe their bottom. Yeah, ceramic to wipe. Ow. French anthropologist Philippe Charlier expands on this toilet hygiene history in the British Medical Journey. These flat terracotta discs found in these ancient sites had residue on them. Residue like, yeah. Also, what a lousy find. You're like, oh, I found an ass wipe. I found an ancient ass wipe. Nice, I'm gonna put that in my pocket. They also discovered a Greek cup which said on it, 3 stones are enough to wipe one's arse, which is pretty funny. 3, really? I'm like, guy, I'm like 8 or 9 minimum. Number 5, naked exercise. This next one, look, I'm not saying it's unusual, but maybe I'm on board with this one. I don't know, it looks kind of fun. You ever forget a towel when you shower? You gotta do that naked silly run through the hallway. You feel like a goblin, you feel like Bigfoot just nude in your hallway. That's my favorite run. I feel like the alien from Signs just walking around, just very lanky, you know what I mean? Ancient Greeks used to work out like that. They used to walk around sweaty and naked and then lift some weight. The word gymnasium translates to the Greek term gymnasion, which meant at the time, school for naked exercise. Fun fact right there. Xavier's school for gifted youngsters or Ezekiel's school for naked exercise. How do you pick, right? 50-50. Just don't set up shop behind the guy doing squats. That's gonna be a bad time in the ancient gym. Number 4, wine time. When we think of ancient Greeks, we think of wine and parties and I guess now naked exercise. Sorry about that. But was it really a drunken festival of love all the time? Not really at all. Ancient Greeks actually rarely drank wine without diluting the hell out of it first. The water to wine ratio was 4-to-1. So yeah, you'll be hydrated, that's for sure. Regular Joes would drink at taverns and the rich would throw these big lavish house parties. And some things stayed the same over all these years, but ancient Greeks believed that drinking undiluted wine could cause blindness or insanity. Yeah, I think that's just called blacking out, my friend, but who knows? Number 3, human sacrifice. All right, these last 3 we're gonna get pretty weird. We found the remains of a 3,000-year-old skeleton in Greece, and they found the skeleton on the side of Mount Lycaon, which historians know is the site of animal sacrifice for Zeus. That's a fun place to be. We'll set up a picnic not there. Ancient writers mention this site and how human sacrifice was also at play. And thanks to technology, we can confirm that this is indeed the case. The upper part of the skull was missing and the body was laid on 2 lines of stones with stone slabs laid on the pelvis. So yeah, doesn't look really natural if you ask me. We look at Greece, of course, as the birthplace of philosophy, democracy, and 100-meter hurdles, all that good stuff. But they also did some sacrifice stuff, apparently. Yeah, you don't really learn that in school, don't you? Science has allowed us to look all over the world as well, not just Greece. Ancient Egyptians, Aztecs, the Mayans, oh my god, this one was huge. After Mayan ball games, the losing team would be sacrificed. That would suck. Those are some high stakes right there. I would kind of love to watch that game. That's pretty crazy. Number 2, Greek statues. We've all done it at one point, we gotta admit. You're at a museum, you see a big statue, it's massive. This warrior represented has like 16 abs, he's made of bronze, he's 8 feet tall. The amount of detail got into their body is jaw-dropping, it's impressive. And then you see what they got here and you're like, why is that so small? Why'd they make this part so small and your abs are so big? Did you know ancient Greeks would make their you-know-what small on statues on purpose? Yeah, men who were well endowed, if I can say that, they were more often than not foolish in history. They only ruled for lust. So if you had a big brain instead of a big you were the talk of the town. Ladies would whisper about you as you passed them. Whenever an actor would play a fool on stage, they would be given a comedically large, setup. That's how you knew that he was the villain or the fool back then, because he had a big, I guess. The way we see these statues today meant that they had self-control and intelligence, and it wasn't always about this, right? So whenever you see a big dude with a little statue, that's how you know. He was very noble lad there. Number 1, the Battle of Marathon. Every New Year's, there's always that one guy on Facebook who just becomes a runner. He has the squirt water belt, the whole shit. They train for a marathon, they do it, they tell you about it, they remind you every single day in the office. What is a marathon? Was it a person? Is it a name for 42 kilometers? Well, it was actually a battle back in 490 BC. It was a battle between ancient Greeks and Persian invaders sent by King Darius. Now the Persians arrived to Marathon, about 20,000 of them, and they arrived to punish the Greeks for supporting the Lonians, who revolted against the Persians. Now the Greeks were outnumbered, but they attacked hard and fast. They took out 6,000 Persians and eventually they just fled entirely, which would have been my plan from the start. See ya. The number of Greek fighters lost was around 200, so far less casualties. The story of Philippides came to be at this time. He ran the first ever marathon. He ran all the way from, well, the place Marathon to Athens to deliver messages. And that distance was, you guessed it, 42 kilometers. He was one of the Greek military men known as day-long runners. He did 6 marathons back to back every day. Yeah, my knees hurt just reading. We gotta get out of here. They're gonna buckle below me as I'm reading this list.
Number 10, stone toilet paper. It's been said that only 2 things in life are certain: not living and taxes. However, I think a third point needs to be added, and that's everybody goes number 2. It's a part of life. You eat, your body takes in its nutrients, and then it gets rid of the waste. That's the cycle of life. It's kind of beautiful, actually. Then we all have to use an invention that I know we're all thankful for: toilet paper. But have you ever wondered what people of ancient times did? I know I do. After all, there was no Walmartius to purchase Greco Papyrus Rolleus, or the Greek staple that is olive oil. Trust me, that'll come into play later. Well, the answer, my friend, is very simple. Even simpler than the 3 seashells, and everybody knows how to use them. Cleansing stones. Yes, that's right. Smooth, rounded stones, just for the occasion. My mom always joked around about using newspapers like some folks did in the old days, but stones, they actually use stones to do that part. A little too rough for my Gerber baby bottom, if you will. No thank you. No. Mom, I was a Gerber baby. Number 9, painted statues. When you close your eyes and think of ancient Greece, what do you imagine? Oh yes, I'm just imagining it right now. Beautiful coastline cities with harbors bustling full of ships carrying fresh fish and cargo, men and women flocking the brick streets and markets. White marble monuments surround the city like clouds of opulence, and the statues of pure white marble depicting Greek gods and myths of yonder. Sounds great, right? Well, what if I told you that not all these beautiful white statues that you could see in museums were pure white marble as we know them today? Yes, that's right. Greek marble statues had color. They were painted with the best and brightest colors they had at the time. It's only with time that the color has faded. Some people want to repaint only after a few short years. Try a couple thousand. Number 8, beef up. Gotta get the gains, gotta get swole so your Discord crush will send you the heart emojis and ooh-oohs that you so desire. I'm sorry, that's so cringe, I'm so sorry. At least that's how I'm told romance works these days. Romance might have changed, but working out has not. The ancient Greeks worked out to maintain a peak athletic performance. That's right, brother. However, it wasn't exactly treadmills and pumping iron. One Greek athlete's training involved carrying a cow calf around all day until the calf reached adulthood. Pretty cool. This is all done naked, by the way, though, and slathered in olive oil. Not so cool. Athletes also ate their fair share to keep up with all the working out they did. Some cases up to 10 pounds of meat and bread a day. Talk about beefy boys. That's right, brother. Number 7, high fashion. I say if you got it, flaunt it. Humbly, of course. Maybe a nice pair of shoes, your favorite pants, or for me, a brand new suit that makes me feel gorgeous, baby, yeah. But for the most part, I shop at Walmart. Let's be honest, I don't have that kind of money for the Gucci flip-flops down to the socks. However, for the great Greek philosophers like Socrates, they were wealthy enough to enjoy a literal finer cut of cloth. Yes, they could, but Socrates said no. I want the peasant look, please. Apparently, the wise Greek man often didn't wear shoes and always wore the same ratty coat. It's also said that Socrates wasn't exactly a good looker. Put on some shoes though, that'd be rough. You're walking around all day with no shoes on? Oh, those would be rough looking feet, buddy. Number 6, smart streaker. Anyone that's ever spent time with a physics professor has probably heard the story 100 times, and that professor probably genuinely thinks this is a funny story. Archimedes, the famed Greek philosopher, made a strange discovery. Strangely, one night after a long day of hard thinking, he went to take a bath. Pondering the questions of life, he noticed something was happening in the tub. No, not his rubber ducky going missing, but rather a simple yet interesting concept of displacement. When he was submerged in the water rose. He deducted that if he measures the difference, that would equal his weight of volume. And if it works with an old man, then it would work with other things as well. He was so excited by this that he shot up and ran outside screaming, "Eureka! Eureka!" Well, that part may not have happened, but if it did, I'd hate to be his neighbor. No one wants to see that, man. Number 5. I had the high ground, Anakin. According to a disputable legend, however, given my semi-okay Palpatine impression, I had to include this on the list. Basically, Emdocles was a smart dude and had just earned himself a decent track record. He helped save people. Dude was credible. He gained somewhat of a following afterwards, almost to the point of worship. This may have gone to his head as he started to believe his own divineness and jumped into an active volcano, where strangely enough, he does not come out of it. Now I wonder what would have caused that to happen. Perhaps maybe he didn't have a certain galactic friend who was the Senate, the whole Senate and nothing but the Senate, and could shoot lightning out of his fingertips and help out of someone of the burning lava, yes. Number 4, Manure Burial. Heraclitus had edema, which is basically some bloating in the hands and feet due to excess water and fluids in the body. Not a big deal. Although, sometimes in ancient times, all diseases were serious because, well, in ancient times, frankly, a papyrus cut could be the difference between you attending the next celebration of town or taking a cruise down the river Styx. Heraclitus had a solution for this. As a learned man, he was never wrong. So what was his scientific medical solution to his ailment that might have gone away on its own? Well, he basically buried himself in manure so it would get rid of the excess water in his body. Yeah, I don't know how that works either. Unfortunately, he was attacked and eaten by wild dogs in his mud bath. He did not make it out. Number 3, Boys Club. Hypatia was a female philosopher at the Library of Alexandria, something that any archaeologist or historian would give their right kidney to witness in its glory. What's so scandalous about her, besides being a woman with knowledge that would scare a lot of men at the time? Things were alright until a Christian mob discovered she was a pagan. Well, this certainly could not stand, and in probably the weirdest assassination attempt ever, she was unalived by being sliced with clamshells. Or roof tiles. The translation gets a little lost. Regardless, we're not playing Clue here, so it doesn't matter if the Christian mob uses the shells in the library or not. The fact is, an intelligent woman who taught others was removed for no good reason. Number 2, countrymen, lend me your ears. Zeno of Elea was a learned man, and in a rebellion against his leader Nearchus, he was captured and received the beating only a stepson would know. However, in Zenos' final act of defense, he asked Nearchus to come close so that he could whisper in his ear. and channeling his inner Mike Tyson reeled back his head and came in to take a bite out of his ear like Scruff McGruff the dog takes a bite out of crime. Sure, he was victorious, but history tends to remember things like that. You got a page in a textbook somewhere, so you know. Number 1. Zeus. Does this man deserve an introduction? Here's another topic that could honestly be its own video. Zeus, the god of gods, the man with all the power and the affinity for tossing lightning bolts the same way Gordon Ramsay tosses salads. But I'll just write them off for you. Turned his first wife into a fly and ate her. Constantly unfaithful to his other wives. Tied Prometheus to a rock and had his liver eaten by a bird. Wiped out humanity. Cursed a man to push a boulder up a steep hill for eternity. And made Atlas put the world on his shoulders. Shout out to my people in the audience who get anxiety trying to order a pizza over the phone. Now imagine you have to literally hold the whole world on your shoulders. Oh, too much pressure. Yes, I know Zeus is mythological, but a lot of others on this could be as well. This was a long time ago. Some documents just didn't live that long.
Number 10. Displaced. Although the idea of exile doesn't seem like an unsettling outcome, but if you lived in ancient Greece, it is for sure something that you might want to be a little nervous about. Just like in Survivor or in any other modern game show, in Athens every year they had a vote if they wanted to kick someone out, and if they voted yes, then an ostracism, which is a little pot, they would actually be held 2 months later, and the citizens would give the name of those that they wished to ostracize to a scribe, as many of them were illiterate, and then they would scratch the name on the pottery shards, and the shards were piled up facing down so the votes would remain anonymous. The person whose pile contained the most ostraca, or basically the most votes, would be banished and would have to sashay away. The person newly ostracized would have 10 days to leave the city, and if he attempted to return, the penalty was death. The property of the man banished was not confiscated, and there was no loss of his status. On some plus side, after 10 years he was actually allowed to return without stigma. Number 9. Slavery. In this time they really were pro-slaves. If by any means of punishment you would mean of ending up as a slave. To the ancient Greeks, slaves are after all expected to be loyal to their masters. A slave who ratted out on their masters would then be subsequently convicted and would be put to death for disloyalty. That's why they had to be tormented before a testimony could be taken. Enslaved people who lived and largely worked independently of their masters were those least likely to feel the iron rod of discipline. Athens slaves too could be physically punished or even tormented, and enslaved people elsewhere were also subjected to beatings. Athens alone was home to an estimated 60,000 to 80,000 slaves during the 5th and the 4th century BC, with each household having an average of 3 or 4 enslaved people attached to it. Slaves in ancient Greece did not have any human or civil rights, and they were tormented for different reasons. Their owner could beat them whenever he wanted because he was a jerk, or their testimony was needed for a lawsuit. They were tormented into confessing to their own guilt or incriminate someone else. Number 8. Flogging. Yeah, you might be familiar with this one. Flogging, or known as whipping, was also used in ancient Greece. Offenders could be subjected to beatings or implements like a whip or a rod, which were meant to cause pain and severe as a deterrent. For these times, ritual floggings were actually practiced, and heretics were whipped with a thong of oxtail leather or parchment strips. When the cane strikes or objects like these are used, the blood is forced from the tissue beneath. Damages of the small blood vessels and individual cells would cause leakage of blood and tissue fluid into the skin and underlying tissue, increasing the tension in these areas. In ancient Athens, bodily punishments like flogging and whipping were deemed inappropriate for free Athenian men, but were actually more reserved for slaves and foreigners.
Number 7. One night sneeze. We've all been there. It was a hot summer night. You went out with a couple of friends for girls' night. Tonight is all about the ladies. No guys, you say to each other. And now you're in the club and drinks are flowing. And that's when you see him. He's tall, handsome, and has blue eyes. You're smitten. Hours later, you find yourself under the sheets up to the neck like it's a primetime sitcom. The sun peers its way through curtains that haven't been cleaned since he bought them. And yes, that's right. That's a one-night stand. They happen, and sometimes people just want to have a little fun. Can you blame them? I can't. What I'm getting at is sometimes nights like those can have an 18-year investment after a 9-month down payment, if you catch my drift. The ancient Greeks had a simple solution for ladies who weren't interested in that kind of bargain. Sneeze. Yes, sneeze. Achoo! Sneeze. Sneeze away the night of Cinco de Mayo tequila shots at a bar called O'Grady's. The Greeks believed if you sneezed a whole bunch, you couldn't get preggers. Simple. Just simple. I can do a sneeze, dude. Simple. Number 6. Tasteful Doctor. As humans today, we have a lot of knowledge in the medical field, and we're only getting smarter. Who knows what we'll be capable of in 100 years? Kind of amazing to think about. Well, despite the technology that the Greeks did not possess, any college professor today will tell you that they were not stupid. They weren't. We owe a lot to them. Part of that is in the medical field. For example, urine tests. A lot can be told about a person from their urine. The Greeks knew this, but they didn't have all that fancy schmancy machines to tell them what was in their urine. Instead, they did the next best thing and tasted the forbidden lemonade in order to determine what was wrong with the patient. Sure, you can tell a lot by that way too, but if the person was sick, well, you know how that goes. Let's keep the lemonade in the cups, please. Yes, I believe. Yes, you have something wrong with your liver. Number 5, athlete juice. Speaking of gross, this one is straight out of Johnny Knoxville's playbook. Shout out to those guys. I hope one day I'm cool enough and famous enough to meet them. Maybe do a bit. Chetty's knuckin' fut, so I'm down. Anyway, back to the Greeks. Remember when I said the Greek bodybuilders like to oil up? Well, so did the athletes. Here's where it gets gross. After days of events and running around in the dirt, naked with olive oil, these athletes wouldn't always bathe. But why? Well, the answer is marketing. Just like Gatorade commercials of the early 2000s, these athletes were covered in juice. This sludge was scraped off in what I'm sure was a very humanizing experience and jarred up to be sold like a superhero serum for the average Joe Schmo to drink or rub on themselves. This mixture was called Gloios. No thank you. I will pass. Number 4, Nocturne Totem. It was 2008. I was alone in the dark one summer night. There, illuminating my poor innocent face, was Call of Duty World at War, the latest action-packed Hollywood blockbuster FPS from Activision. Now, I always finish campaigns first before moving on to multiplayer. Just when I thought it was over, a new cutscene started playing, except this one was different. It was dark, and the camera was shaky. And that's when I saw them, twisted and screeching undead, sprinting at me. I have never turned off a console so fast in all my life. Well, it seems the ancient Greeks shared this fear as well. To prevent zombies eating their very smart brains, the Greeks oftentimes buried folks with heavy stuff on top of them, just to prevent them from climbing out of their graves. That's the smartest people on earth, and they think the zombies are gonna come get them. That's crazy. Guys, come on. Number 3, diluted wine. The Greeks were well known for their artisan goods and foods. Their wine is no different. Some good stuff out there. However, did you know that Greeks would dilute their wine with a little H2O? Drinking wine pure was sometimes considered to be an unholy act, as it was said it could make a man unruly. Well, they're not too far off from the truth on that one, actually. Drinking too much wine can make you go a little silly. So yeah, diluting it kinda makes sense. Sometimes during hot weather, if it was available, snow was added for a cool and refreshing drink on the hot Greek island days. It sounds kind of nice, kind of like an ice spritzer, a Greek ice wine spritzer. How nice, wow. Number 2, the finger. The ultimate hand gesture. I know you're gonna have to blur it out or not even put it in, but here we go. That's what I'm talking about. The ultimate hand gesture. It starts with a, "Hey, I'm walking here," and ends with a simple finger in the air. It's been used for centuries and will probably be used for many more. Ever wondered where the origins of the most powerful hand gesture besides Darth Vader's force choke come from? Well, the almighty gesture has its origins in ancient Greece. Who would have thought? While no one is 100% sure the exact origins of it, we know it was used back then and it was around. The very interesting Dionis was known to use it against those passing by he was distasteful of. He didn't like a lot of people. Maybe it was because it was simple, phallic, or just kind of strange. But at the end of the day, we all know what it means. Number 1, mud bath. I know Steve-O has literally done something like this before, and if there's rules you should write this one very down, this second, right now, write it down. Be kind to one another, and work hard in life. And never do anything ever that Steve-O has ever done. Those are really good rules. Trust me, it's good words to live by. So what exactly am I talking about? Well, in ancient Greece, for those who could afford it and had the time, they needed to relax. I need to relax. They needed the spa treatment. Heck, I've never even been to a spa. Someone take me. The ancient Greeks loved mud baths, and from what I hear, it's actually got quite a lot of benefits to it. However, the Greeks added one secret ingredient. One piece of the Krabby Patty formula I know most of us would say no to, even Plankton. Crocodile dung. Oh god. Yes, that's right. They bathed in hot crocodile refuse. It's great for the skin, apparently. So much so that it was thought it had beautifying and restorative properties. Go ahead then. Jump right in, guys. Water's fine. Come on in. Number 10, Clash of the Titans. An Avengers level threat, baby. The Titans were the big bad giants who ruled over the earth and the gods. Naturally, they all got along and there were never any problems, ever. Yeah, right. They fought like cats and dogs, though I never understood that because all the dogs and cats I know always got along great. But the Titans fought, and they fought some more, until your favorite boy Zeus had enough and kind of took control over everything. It's Zeus, it's what he does. It's too bad Aaron Yeager wasn't there to help out. Number 9, Prometheus. Poor Prometheus. This is my favorite tale from Greek mythology. I think it's rather sad for Prometheus. All he wanted to do was give us the knowledge of fire, and look at all the things that we did with it. Forged iron and steel, heated our homes, so no one would ever go cold again. And we cooked, which gave Gordon Ramsay 23 hit shows and a reason to curse when asking for the lamb sauce. Where's the lamb sauce? Prometheus went directly against Zeus's orders, and if you didn't know, that's kind of a bad thing. It can wind you up in a rather unfortunate position. A position like being chained up and having a large bird come feast on your intestines. Like I eat mom's spaghetti. She makes a good spaghetti. Thanks, Mom. You make a good spaghetti. Number 8, Icarus. I think we can all relate to this one, or at least have been told a version of this when we were flush. Things were going good for us. In a nutshell, Icarus got some wax wings and gained the ability to flight. Mind you, that was probably the dream of many ancient peoples. After Icarus got his wings, he got a little arrogant. He wanted to push his wings to the limit. Kind of like Iron Man in the first Iron Man movie. But instead of falling in a multi-million-dollar supersuit and looking handsome while doing it, Icarus sniffed one too many of his own farts and flew too close to the sun, where he burned up in it. So what's the lesson learned here, folks? Keep yourself grounded and don't sniff your own farts.
Number 7, Barbecue 2. Yes, I know the whole stick thing, but that's what they did. Like all other forms of punishment, the pike or impalement was the next course of the deal. The victim was inserted halfway up their back privates while held above the spike for longitudinal, and the spike would run them through as the gravity took hold, avoiding vital organs emerging through the skin on the shoulder or neck. For several days, a person might endure this. Instead, the torso was penetrated by the stake during transversal, either from the front to the back or other way around. Impalement was a very common practice across the Pharaonic Egypt, Europe, Mesopotamia, and the ancient Near East, the Neo-Assyrian Empire, and of course, ancient Greece. Number 6, I believe I can fly. In ancient Greece, another method of execution was the act of throwing a criminal over a precipice. This practice was not limited to Athens, but it was actually very prevalent in other regions like Sparta, Delphi, Corinth, etc. The execution would involve pushing the convict over a high, steep cliff where they would fall into a deep trench known as a Varathron in Athens. This particular form of execution was typically reserved for individuals who were convicted of religious or political crimes. The denial of burial rites further added the humiliation and disgrace brought upon the criminal, as they would be left unburied, their remains exposed and vulnerable to the elements, as well as the animals. Reference to this method of execution are not found after 406 BC, and the Athenians appear to have dug a new trench in the 4th century, but this was probably designed to receive convicts who were executed by other means. Number 5, rats. They really do love using rats back in the day, but to be honest, you'd be surprised that they use rats even as recent as 1970s in Chile and Argentina during the Dirty War using the same methods. The method, if some might know, involved trapping rats in a bottomless cage atop a victim's abdomen. Burning coals were then placed on a small tray atop the cage, heating the metal from above. Desperation to escape the heat, the rats would begin to burrow only through the soft surface that they could find, which is the victim's flesh. With sharp claws and teeth, the rats would quickly gnaw their way into the victim's bowels, causing excruciation, pain, and terror. The technique particularly came in handy when, as I mentioned before, the Dutch leaders were trying to extract information from Spanish enemies. As soon as the caged rats were placed on the prisoner's stomach, the terrified men would often give up and they would actually just expose everything else that they knew. Number 4, stoning. Stoning or lapidation is a form of capital punishment where a group throws stones at a person until the subject dies from a blunt trauma. It has been attested as a form of punishment from grave misdeeds since ancient times. Stoning is attested in the Near East since ancient times as a form of capital punishment for grave sins. However, stoning as a practice was not geographically limited to only near the East, as it is also a significant historical record of stoning being employed in the West as well. Ancient geographers describe both the elder and younger atrocities being stoned to death in ancient Greece around the 7th century BCE. Stoning is condemned by human rights groups as a form of cruel and unusual punishment and torment as a serious violation of human rights. As of now, human rights organizations argue that many acts targeting of stoning should not be legal in the first place by allowing them interferes with people's rights to private life. Number 3, brazen bull. Throughout history, humans in general have created an enclave of many extraordinary things. One of the cruelest punishments invented in ancient Greece, this particular type of torment was just as pleasant as everything else on this list, or rather unpleasant. The brazen bull was just that of a sculpture of a bull with a fire built underneath it. The victim was placed inside and slowly roasted to death as the fire burned and the metal grew hotter and hotter. I'm pretty sure you can imagine the pain of the victims that they were in, so that the creators of the brazen bull would just enjoy it. The bull was casted hollow and was used with a fire built below, and it was designed so that it could be opened and a person would be forced inside. As I mentioned, the fire would start underneath and the person would be burnt as the smoke and steam would escape through the nose. Incense was also placed inside to counteract the smell of burning flesh, and it is said that the series of tubes inside the statue was designed to distort the screams of the victims to make it sound like an animal. Once the individual had succumbed into their charred state, apparently the people there would also use their bones and turn them into bracelets. Number 2, the rack. The rack was a torment device consisting of a rectangular frame with a roller at each end. The victim's limbs were stretched and tied to the rollers. By turning the rollers, the body would be subjected to increasing tension, causing extreme pain and potential dislocation or dismemberment of their joints. The exact origin of the rack is pretty unclear, but the earliest mention of its use was in ancient Greece. The rack was often used as a torment method to extract confession, with the execution itself coming anyway from another method. Nevertheless, victims would perish on the rack, and for those who did not, it was far more likely more painful for the persecutor to the method of actual execution. The most infamous case of the rack as it used in ancient Greece was associated with Herostratus, an arsonist who was set on fire to the second temple of Artemis in Ephesus in 356 BC. Finally, number 1, crucifixion. This form of execution was mostly associated with the death of Jesus, was rather practiced in ancient Greece, but there is at least one mention in the historical text of the Greeks condemning someone to this slow and excruciating death. According to the Greek writer Herodotus in his histories, there's an account of the execution of a Persian general by the Athenians around 479 BC. The Persians had burned Athens just a year prior in 480 BC, so the harsh punishment may have reflected the intense anger of the Greeks. In any case, Herodotus wrote that they nailed him to a plank and hung him, and this, as you know, is the form of crucifixion.
Number 10, Icarus. We all probably know of Icarus and the phrase taken to sum up his story: don't fly too close to the sun. What happened to Icarus? Well, he was made wings by his father, but they were made out of wax, which oddly enough is a strange material to use in building wings, really. His father, though, was Daedalus, who made the famed maze that the Minotaur of Crete resided in, and was known to be a great inventor and engineer. Yet, for some reason, he chose wax as his material for wings, so kinda contradicts him being a great inventor, I think, but okay. Maybe he was just trying to prove how skilled he was. He was like, look at this, I can make wings out of any material, whatever I got, feathers, wax, whatever. Daedalus was actually being kept in Crete as a prisoner, which is why he made the wings for his son to basically escape captivity. Daedalus warns his son Icarus to not fly too close to the sun, because clearly these wings will melt since, you know, they are made out of wax. And what does Icarus do? He takes the wings, he puts them on, bids farewell to his father saying, don't worry, I got this, and he immediately flies too close to the sun. The wings melt, he falls, he dies. I mean, what even is this story? The real moral should be don't make wings out of wax. It's not a good building material for wings. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Bumblebee, be sure to let us know by clicking that subscribe button if you're not subscribed already. Number 9. Mom, where do human souls come from? Well, in the modern age, this question has evolved. You've likely heard it before. Where do babies come from? Back in ancient Greek times, people instead wanted an answer to this far more philosophical version of said question: where do human souls come from? The answer? Also storks, maybe? It was believed that human souls traveled down to Earth as birds, storks included, I imagine. Number 8. Leda and the Swan. Another mess that in retrospect is pretty terrible but is also quite ridiculous is the myth of Leda and the Swan. This is a story about Zeus having an affair and cheating on his wife Hera, because that's just how he always be doing in myths. Zeus thought Leda was very beautiful and he basically wanted to sleep with her. Zeus wonders to himself what would be the best form to take to seduce Leda. A handsome man? Make myself look like her own husband? Nah, I know, I'll turn myself into a swan. And indeed, he somehow seduces her as a swan. Now, there are versions of this story where Zeus does not even actually seduce Leda, instead forcing himself upon her, but I prefer the version of the story where Zeus just seduced her as a swan, because I mean, what does that even look like? That's so ridiculous. Did he go out? Did he like wear a little swan bow tie? Did he go out as a swan and like get a nice bottle of wine and say sweet things to her? And then she was just like, yeah, I'm down with this. This is one charming swan. So Zeus and Leda end up sleeping together and she bore him 2 children, one of which ended up being Helen of Troy. However, I just love the idea that Leda maybe actually did fall in love with the swan without even ever maybe knowing that it was actually Zeus. I think that would be crazy. She also has like 2 sets of twins, I think at once, that are 2 of them are her husbands and 2 of them are the swans, because she slept with both of them the same day, and I'm just like, that doesn't even make sense. That's not how babies work. But I guess if it's a god, maybe it works differently.
Number 7, Jason and the Argonauts. Avenger level threat acquired. For some reason in our lives, you find stories of our favorite heroes forming almighty and powerful groups. The Avengers, the Justice League, BTS. That one might have too much power. But yes, Jason and the Argonauts were a band of heroes on adventures, slaying beasts, taking names, and Greekifying the area. Sadly, for Jason and the Argonauts, every time they try and make a movie about it, it just never works for them. I don't know. They had a visually impressive one in the 60s, and everything after that has just been a complete misfire. Hollywood, if your casting calls come my way, just know I make a great Jason. Look at me. I could be Jason. A sword, a shield. And there we go, that's it. Number 6, Hercules. Hercules, the strong one. Or the one where Danny DeVito coaches him through the process of being a Greek legend. If Danny DeVito is coaching you through anything, that probably means you're gonna come out on top. And yes, before you start typing in the comment section, technically speaking, Hercules is the Roman copy of Heracles. I know. However, it's kind of one of those things that everyone just knows the one, so anytime a Greek dude shows up with muscles, you blush and you think of Hercules. As far as Greek mythology goes, it doesn't get any more classic than a super strong guy with abs and biceps, and maybe a little bit of olive oil on him, I don't know. Number 5, Sisyphus. Oh baby, do I feel this one. Story of my life, honestly, day late and $1 short. Some of you folks at home may also share the same fate as me and this chiseled Greek man doomed for eternity. This one is also one of my favorites. Basically, Sisyphus was cheating the devil. Cheating death itself, actually. After sliming his way out of the underworld one too many times, Big Daddy Zeus had to intervene. Also, when I say I relate to him, it's not because I'm a trickster who cheats my demise or cheats the devil or Hades. I'll explain. So, after Sisyphus had done what he'd done, Zeus sentenced him to roll a giant boulder up a hill for eternity. When he gets to the top, she rolls back down to the bottom and he has to start all over again. Every day for the rest of time. Not just life, for time. Sometimes in life it feels like you're on a grind and you work and work and work, and sometimes you go right back to square one no matter how hard you work. That sucks and that can be exhausting, but never give up, because Chetty ain't, and neither should you. Number 4, King Midas. The lesson in this one, folks, is to be careful what you wish for. King Midas was being granted a wish. He wished for anything I touch be turned to gold. Now, I'm not an economist because I already have too many jobs on the internet, but you can imagine how at today's rate of gold, how wealthy you would be. Sheesh! Yeah, gold was valuable back then, but now, wowie woo. So his wish was granted, and everything he touched turned to gold, which for a good couple hours must have been the most fun anyone has ever had ever. Dude was seeing drachma signs. However, this wealthy gift he had been given quickly turned into a curse or a burden. Everything he touched turned to gold. That included his food. Because of this, he starved. To fix this burden, he bathed in a river, and it said that's why gold can be found in that river. I wouldn't mind having that power myself, but if I made food gold, or even worse, what if I made my beer gold? Number 3, Narcissist. This one's in the name. Basically, there was a guy named Narcissus, and he was gorgeous. Like George Clooney, Brad Pitt, Ryan Reynolds gorgeous, all put together. Oh. And he knew it, and he loved his image. Now, as a guy who goes on camera every day, naturally, you hate yourself. You hate your self-image. That's how it goes. Ask anyone here, they would tell you the same thing. But also, as someone who's on camera every day and funny from time to time, you kind of like yourself on camera and you kind of like your self-image. It's a very strange relationship we have. However, no one is as bad as it comes to as Narcissus. One day in the forest, he came across a body of water where he saw his reflection cast, and it was so handsome, so gorgeous, that he couldn't look away. Ever. Hence the name Narcissist, or Narcissist. Or what most girls in high school find out what their boyfriends have. Narcissism. Ladies, let me know. Have you ever dated someone who has narcissism or looked in the mirror too long? Let me know, I'm curious. Number 2, Medusa. I feel like a lot of people know this one. Medusa, the half beautiful lady, half head of snakes in her head and half monster thing with powers. Yes, I realize that was 3 halves and that doesn't add up, but you're talking to a guy who was voted class clown in the high school yearbook and not voted most likely to succeed in math. Because I just wouldn't. But she was the Gorgon monster who would turn men into stone. I do know that. If they looked into her eyes. That wasn't until your boy Perseus showed up like Link with a mirror shield and gave her a taste of her own medicine. What's the lesson on this one? I'm not sure. Maybe it's don't be so sure of your abilities. Maybe it's seeing things through. Or maybe it's having an extensive knowledge of tactics from a late 90s Nintendo character. That you never know when you're going to need that. You never know. I know that stuff. It can come in handy. Number 1, Pandora's Box. I know you guys know this one, but this one is so simple. At first glance, it's not about turning things into gold or weird snakehead ladies or giants rising from beneath the earth to fight each other. It's a box. Something ain't good in that box, but it's just a box. So don't open it. I'm gonna say it again because there's gonna be people in the comment section that are gonna say, but Chetty, because you said don't open it, that means I really wanna open it. Imagine I'm Robert De Niro telling you not to open it. Nope, no way. Nope, not gonna happen. Nope, null and void. Don't do it. Don't do it. That's how you know I'm serious, because I did that impression. Oh great, somebody opened it. Yes, that's right, Pandora's box was opened and it said that all the evils of the world were released from the box. Good tale, good moral, but who the heck thought putting all those evil things in the world in the box was a great idea? Whatever happened to just having memento boxes? You know, you open up a thing like this is the time I farted on camera, this is the time I went to the cottage, you know what I mean? Whatever happened to that? Number 10, Dionysia. Okay, this one's pretty cool actually. The best way I could describe it is like it's a very old film festival, or how my friends and I treated the MCU movies. A bunch of my friends lived together and it was kind of like the House of Nerds. We were pretty cool, I swear. We all couldn't wait to get out and see the movies with who it seemed like every other person on Earth was also going to see the movies. The Avengers, they were pretty cool. That's what Dionysia in a nutshell is. Just less Captain America and no spandex. People would flock Athens to come watch plays in their huge amphitheaters. And oh, of course, just like all parties on this list here, there's gonna be lots of food and drink and wine. Can't have a showing without wine. Can't have that. Number 9. Kotobos. Well, in case you're wondering, yes, I have been to a few parties in my life. High school and college were times of great nights and even worse hangovers. Well, what can I say? I just enjoyed my time with friends and even strangers sometimes. And of course, I may or may not have had a few beer. That depends on if my mom's watching this video or not. I'm sorry, Mom. I also may have partaken in a few drinking games like Flip Cup, King's Cup, and my favorite, beer pong. You're looking at the basement champion there, folks, the number 1. You're looking at, I'm number 1, brother! Well, surprisingly enough, even in ancient times, the Greeks enjoyed drinking games. You wouldn't think. A game called Kotobos. The objective of the game was to swirl your cup around and throw it at targets. A lot of times inside the home. To me, it sounds like I'm going to need a towel for all that spilled liquid. I gotta clean up before Mom gets home or else I'll be in trouble. Number 8, frat parties. Okay, so given that they love to drink and party and as well as play games, it seems to make sense that the comparison of a modern day frat house is that of to the Greeks and the whole fraternity thing, that they're Greek names. What I'm getting at is sometimes the frat houses aren't the most well taken care of. Have you ever seen Animal House? Yeah, exactly, you know what I mean. Well, as it turns out, the ancient Greeks might have had some frat behavior themselves, besides the drinking games. And actually, besides wearing togas, I'm not sure if that was true or not. The Greeks would sometimes throw furniture around in their stupors. It's so strange, you just think of them being such educated wise men, not toga partying 70s animals, but here we are.
Number 7, the white crow. Were crows always black feathered? According to ancient Greek myth, no, they were not. Initially, they were apparently white, which I don't know if that's actually true in science, but in mythology, that's what we're going with. The crow or raven was associated with Apollo initially, and he had his own symbolic bird spy on his lover Coronis. When the bird returned and told Apollo that Coronis was actually being unfaithful to the god, in an anger, he charred the feathers of his bird, turning the famed white feather crow into the black feathered version we have today. That's not really how charring works for feathers though. Pretty sure that bird should be featherless or deceased. Number 6. The origin of the Minotaur. This is another tragic story, but at the same time it's also pretty weird, especially by modern day standards. Poseidon gifted to Minos, the king of Crete, a bull which was to be sacrificed, a beautiful snow white bull. However, Minos thought to himself, wow, that is a beautiful bull. I know I'm supposed to sacrifice to the gods. I know the gods are the whole reason that I have this like beautiful kingdom on Crete, and that I should pay tribute to them, and that to mess with them based on other myths that I've heard is most definitely not a good idea. However, I'm just gonna keep this bull and not sacrifice it because YOLO! So what happened to Minos? Well, oddly, even though this was ultimately his call in the myth, nothing happens to him. He was fine. But his wife, however, ends up being punished as a result, which I guess could be seen as a punishment to Minos since she is, after all, you know, his wife. But still, I don't think she deserved any of what comes her way based on what I've heard of her. Pasiphae, Minos' wife, ends up being cursed to fall in love with the bull. So now Minos is saying, wow, this is a really beautiful bull, isn't it? Isn't it, my wife? And Pasiphae is thinking, oh yeah, I mean, wait a minute. Oh yeah, this is a really beautiful bull. Kinda sexy too. And she falls in love with the bull. Together they have a child, and that child ends up being the Minotaur of Crete, who they keep in their labyrinth, which was constructed for them by Daedalus, an amazing engineer and inventor. Which also was pretty terrible because you know this Minotaur didn't really do anything to deserve this punishment either, as far as I know. Other than being born, I guess? He is described as being a monster in mythology, but really he was just the offspring in this story of Pasiphae and her bull Boo. So he shouldn't inherently be evil or anything. I just imagine the poor Minotaur in the maze just being bored as heck and thinking, what did I do to deserve this? Pretty terrible really, and also poor Pasiphae. I wonder if she ever dreamt of having a life with the bull and their like little Minotaur child. Because honestly, Minos really sounds like he sucks most of the time in myth. Number 5. Io and the Gnat. Io was another woman Zeus wanted to be with, but she was much more wary of him. She'd heard the stories and she wasn't planning on falling for the swan trick or any of Zeus's tricks for that matter. Zeus tried many different forms to get with Io, even apparently transforming himself into a mist at one point. However, despite never being with Zeus, Io gets punished anyways. Her father throws her out, and Hera becomes jealous of Io and the attention she is attracting from Zeus, even though it is actually unwanted attention. She turns Io into a cow, condemning her to walk the earth forever plagued by a giant gnat which nips at her rump. I guess the moral of the story is whether you get with Zeus or not, if he has his eye on you, you're basically just in trouble. There's no way out of it. Number 4. The arrival of Odysseus. What if instead of calling people, we just looked at the birds to figure out when our friends would be arriving to join us on a night out? That was a method used back in the day according to myths, at least by oracles, people that could actually read bird patterns. For the arrival of Odysseus in Homer's Odyssey, the movement of the birds across the sky was used to actually predict his arrival. Apparently an eagle flies 3 times overhead and then 3 times to the right, and that translates to Odysseus is arriving. Thanks, birds. Number 3. The ship to Crete. This is probably one of my favorite myths to recount from all of Greek mythology. It is the story of Theseus and a ship that he sailed on in order to rescue the people that were to be sacrificed from his home, Athens. So Theseus finds out that his dad is Aegeus, the king of Athens. However, there is also at this time an understanding between Crete and Athens where Athens is basically made to deliver 14 of their best to sacrifice to Crete's Minotaur. Theseus, however, has a plan, and he decides he is actually going to find a way to save all of the tributes and then return them home, including himself because he's also being sent as one. And his dad, who he just reconnected with, basically says, well, it's gonna be really hard for me to see you go, especially if you don't make it back. I'm just gonna trust that you can save our people, but I need you to promise me that upon your return, you change the sail to let me know that you actually survived. So when I look out at the horizon, I'm not worrying the whole time that the ship on its way back doesn't have you on it or any of these awesome people. Theseus goes and actually succeeds in his mission. He gets some help from Ariadne, the daughter of Minos, who is enchanted by Theseus, and basically decides to help him by giving him a ball of, in some versions of the story, magical thread, which he can then use to retrace his steps after defeating the Minotaur to get back out of the maze. In the rush of his escape, however, it makes Theseus forget his promise to his dad, and he forgets to change the sail in his haste. So Aegeus looks for the ship and sees it returning, but the sail is the same one that he sent sent them out with. It has the exact same color and everything. It has not been changed to signify Theseus' victory. Heartbroken, he flings himself off of a cliff and into what we now refer to as the Aegean Sea. Although this is tragic, the weird good news for Theseus when he returns is that while he has lost his father, which is really sad, this actually now makes him king, so he becomes King Theseus. Number 2. Cassandra Bird Whisperer. Divining people's arrival times by watching birds fly is one thing. Understanding their own speech is on a whole other level though. That is what famous oracle Cassandra claimed she could do. How did she learn how to speak to birds? Apparently a snake once licked her ear, and that is how. Number 1. Pirithous loves Persephone. This is one of the weirdest Greek myths that I remember from my time in high school in Ancient Civilizations class, which honestly happened to be one of my favorite classes ever in high school. This is the story of what happened to the best friend of Theseus. Everyone always talks about Theseus, the champion, the hero, the king, and all of his stories. But did you know that his BFF actually has a pretty cool story all his own? Or rather, not all his own, because he does ask for Theseus' help and for Theseus to join him on his adventure. But I digress. The story is Pirithous' pursuit of Persephone. So Pirithous gets it in his head that he should be with Persephone. Pirithous goes so far as to claim that he can tell that Persephone wants to be with him too. So he tells Theseus one night at a bar, guess what, Persephone, she wants to be with me, man, and I need your help to get down to the underworld to save her from Hades. Theseus at first, he doesn't believe Pirithous. Wants to be with you? Why? Why? What makes you so special? I mean, she's with freaking Hades, man, that would be crazy. But Pirithous insists, trust me, she does. I'm alive and Hades is all about death and the afterlife. Ugh, that's what I have over him. Trust me, Persephone is over the whole underworld scene. Eventually, Pirithous does convince Theseus to join him in his adventure, promising it as a final triumph for his BFF King Theseus, who is getting on in his years at this point. So the two of them end up going down to the underworld. They sneak in through the back door, but just as they think they're safe, they've made it. Who should they run into but Hades himself? And while they begin to panic, Hades actually surprises them, and he says, hey, oh, you guys are here for Persephone, I imagine. Of course, of course. Look, I know all about it, and in fact, Pirithous, I ship you both too. I'm totally cool with this. Just come with me, step into my office, we'll file all the paperwork to have Persephone transferred back over to the world of the living permanently, and you can be on your way. Here, have a seat. Theseus and Pirithous are stunned, and they do take a seat. Hades begins to laugh though. When Pirithous asks what's so funny, he answers, you fools are, of course. That bench is impossibly sticky. Once anyone sits on it, they will never ever be able to get up again. So now you're both stuck to that office bench for eternity in this underworld. So GG, nice try. Oh, and it's also super uncomfortable, so like have a good life. Hades leaves them there, and for years they were indeed stuck on that bench with little imps apparently like nipping at their feet. Theseus does eventually get free though, being rescued by his cousin Hercules later on, but not Pirithous, as far as I know. He just stays there forever. It's probably still there today.
Number 10. Leda. We know that Zeus transforms whatever he wants to get whatever he wants because he can. And being the god of all gods, he is known for also being a bit of a rascal, and by that I mean he sleeps with everyone. And well, anyone. Gods, demigods, animals, mortals, and sometimes with mortals as animals. In this story, Zeus sees Leda and falls in love with her, and so he's like, you know what? I'm gonna transform into a swan and be with her. And he did. He turned into a swan, and the night Leda lays with her husband. Afterwards, she lays with a swan. Somehow she sleeps with a swan, and out comes two eggs, or well, two sets of twins. The first set was Helen and Clytemnestra, and the second set was Castor and Pollux. All myths seem to agree that Pollux was immortal and Helen was Zeus's daughter. Is there a point to this conception? Well, aside the legends of Pollux and Helen, who we know is the Helen of Troy, I don't know. What's more interesting is that he had to be a swan to do it, or she laid eggs, or maybe she didn't, maybe she just had quadruplets. Number 9. Ixion. In this Greek mythology, we see a lot of conception going on, as it is essential to know who your daddy is. Ixion, he wanted to be the father of many, and so the story goes that Ixion was in exile for punishing his supposed father-in-law for stealing his horses. He punished his father-in-law by burning coals on him and violating the guest host rule, as well as kinslaying. So by his actions, he was banished from the city, and when Zeus took pity on him, he invited him to come to Olympus as a guest. Of course, this was probably not a smart move on Zeus's part. Once there, Ixion saw Hera and was completely obsessed with her, so Zeus tested his loyalty by creating a cloud version of Hera, which somehow Ixion impregnated. And Zeus was pissed off. He became angry and punished Ixion by informing Hermes to bind him to an ever-spinning, gigantic flaming wheel for all eternity. And the impregnated cloud gave birth to half horses and half man known as centaurs. Number 8. Lysurus of Thrace. If you got more than one sibling, sometimes your mom would call you by the wrong name and call you by your sibling's name instead. If that hasn't happened to you, it's okay, not everyone can live the same experiences. Especially the son of Lysurus of Thrace, who attacked everyone's favorite fabulous party god, Dionysus, while he was traveling trying to teach everyone how to make wine. The gods punished Lysurus with madness, and in the heat of his madness rampage, he saw his son and thought he was a plant. So he said, "Oh, this vine needs to be clipped," and he wielded his axe and killed his own son as well as the rest of his family. After that, there were many myths saying that he used the same axe to cut off his own legs, because why not? In some way, I guess this was a story warning mortals to not mess with the party god.
Number 7, catch the cross. Here's a modern one for you that I think was pretty cool. Always learning here at Bumblebee. This is new for me. Catching the cross may sound like something you do at a wedding. Instead of a bouquet of flowers, you catch a little Jesus. There you go. Oh, over here. Oh, I want it. All jokes aside, this is one of the biggest celebrations of Orthodox Christians. Basically, it works like little weights your mom bought for the pool so you can practice diving. A priest throws a cross in a holy blessed body of water, and then young men from around all the village come and dive to retrieve it. Diving for weights was one of my favorite things to do as a kid. A cross? Sure, we'll go for it. We'll do it. Let's go. I'll dig up some Jesus. Let's go. Number 6, Ragutsaria. Halloween. North American children's favorite fall holiday. When I went to college, I made friends with a lot of international students, and for a lot of them, it was going to be their first Halloween that coming fall. It was a pretty cool experience to have their first with me. It was pretty cool. Who doesn't love Halloween? Personally, I prefer the costumes that were funny over scary, right? I've done so many funny things. Well, what if I told you that there's a similar holiday in Greece, just less Value Village costumes? In January, people in Castoria City wear scary masks and exorcise demons from the city. Who are you gonna call? Once all these spooky demons have been scared off, the masked people pass by where they sometimes receive coins for their ghost-busting services. That's kinda cool. You wear a mask, go scare someone, and then you get a coin. There's a coin for you. Have a coin. I'll take the drachma. Do they still use drachma? No, it's euros, right? Number 5, Virgin Mary snakes. Okay, this one is a little strange, especially if you've got an issue with snakes. I pride myself living in Canada because we have so many few species of venomous snakes. I believe it's 4 to be exact. That's good. 4 is a good number. That's not a shot at Australia. I love you guys, but you've got too many. On the island of Cephalonia, there's an event that happens every year that resembles our Groundhog Day. Except it's not freezing cold out, and we're not waiting hours for a small town mayor to tell us if he saw a groundhog shadow or not, and to vote for him in the next election. On the 15th of August is the celebration of the Dormition of Virgin Mary. During the service in the Church of the Virgin Mary and Marco Polo, harmless little snakes appear inside and around this church, and at the end of the day, they disappear. As legend tells it, it's because pirates showed up to the island, and thanks to prayer, some snakes showed up as well to chase off said pirates. Kind of a weird story. It's kind of like Groundhog Day, sort of, kind of, right? There's a connection there, sure. Number 4, Christmas boat. Christmas boat, oh Christmas boat, I'm full of turkey, I hope you float. Isn't that cute? That was cute. That was good. I don't know about you guys, but if you've been watching here for a while, you know that I love Christmas. It's my favorite holiday. I love the music, I love the joy in the air, I love spending it with the whole family, grandma and grandpa, the snow, I love it all. And especially the movies. I love Christmas movies. Christmas Vacation is my favorite. Least favorite, Polar Express. It's not as good as people think. I don't know why people keep telling me that. It's not that good. It's not Tom Hanks' best work. Well, what's always good is decorating the Christmas tree. Well, as it turns out, some places in Greece, they decorate the kavarki, which is actually a boat with Christmas decorations instead of a tree. I can go either way, but with the boat, there's less pine needles to clean up and less for the family pet to eat and eventually vomit on the Christmas tree. That happens every year. I swear I got a cat and just does a little hairball on the little thing around the Christmas tree. The skirt, that's what it's called, the skirt. Anyway, number 3. Apocryphes. This is the big one, baby. It's the one all Greeks wait for, or at least so I'm told. She starts off with a big fat church meeting and then no eating meat. No, don't. The whole thing lasts weeks with a surplus of dairy, cheese, and wine consumption, which is just fine by me. Then the masks get busted out, kind of similar to Mardi Gras and other Western Christian celebrations of the sort. Hey, if there's ever some lovely Greek fans out there, Taylor, Adam, and I could go for some delicious Greek cooking. We're all hungry boys, just saying. There's also an assortment of parades that look pretty fun too, the biggest one being in Patra. So in a nutshell, it's Greek Mardi Gras, just less sin. Number 2, Clean Monday. This is where we clean ourselves up. It's the Monday that ends the festivities. Some of you may know it as Lent, but this is huge in Greece. This is where we give up all of our meat eating and we eat seafood. Because, you know, fish, that's not meat for some reason. Right? It's weird. But it's 40 days of repenting, letting go of your sin, and all the mischief of the festival that you may or may not have partaken in. No need to bring up how much wine I drank. But I guess every party has to come to an end, right? And coming in at the #1 spot today, we have plate smashing. Oppa! Now how can I mention any Greek party or celebration without a plate breaking? It's been around for a long time, and how can you make this list without talking about plate smashing and Greek weddings? Any regular Greek wedding beats any of these holidays any day of the week. Enough food to feed an army, literally, music, dancing, and enough wine to sink a ship. All of this as soon as the bride and groom break the plate. It's beautiful. I love it. Shout out to the Danforth, you know what I'm saying? Number 10, tyrants. This is where the name comes from, folks, so we kind of wouldn't have the label if it weren't for ancient Greeks. There's been a lot of tyrants in history, but this is where it all starts. A tyrant refers to an absolute leader who uses his or her power harshly and crudely, exercising total control and oppressing those who stand against the strict rulings or are a desired target of which. Ooh, very fancy definition, Chetty, I like it, wow. The trick is seeing how history remembers you. Leaders like Pol Pot and Joseph Stalin are easily agreeable tyrants, but for example, the ancient Greek leader Alexander the Great can also be considered one. History remembers him for his great triumphs, and while that's interesting to look at because, well, he's one of history's greatest generals, he's really amazing actually. From the safety of our history class, that's fine, but his actual deeds, well, they were less than remarkable. War, looting, trading, YouTube's least favorite S word, and well, many more brutal things that the conqueror from another land did. Not good. Plus, if you were from another land and you saw him do what he was doing, you probably wouldn't think he was such a great guy. It wouldn't be Alexander the Great, it'd be Alexander the Big Stinky Tyrant. So, there you go. Number 9, Diogenes. This one's my favorite. Maybe the least famous of all philosophers, but one with a decent philosophy, or at least so I think so. That's how I feel, and I think it fits in with the modern world. A man who was banished and exiled and had all his possessions stripped away. In some depictions, even his clothes. I wouldn't want that taken away. I gotta have my clothes. Thus, the man was forced to live his life on the streets of Athens, inside a barrel, as you do. This likely is what developed his philosophy of cynicism. He argued that since he was living free of tax or payment in his barrel, that he was truly free. Thus, he had less worries than the commoners, and yeah, that's where his freedom came from. Well, where does the crime part come in? Besides, well, the obvious tax fraud there, and we're gonna pay your taxes. Diogenes might have been a few gyros short of a picnic, if you know what I'm saying, as he would often shout at passers-by, and well, he would do the devil's bedroom dance solo in public, just in his barrel there, just doing. Yeah, I can't say it, but you know what I'm talking about. Number 8, Sith revenge. While I know a lot of people would be behind this, especially for really awful crimes, revenge is not the Jedi way. Sometimes it was an option for the families of those who were wronged in ancient Greece to enact their revenge on the crook, assuming of course the crook was caught. You can just imagine the kind of crimes, the really bad ones. YouTube won't let me say. However, the important point here is that the families of the victim were given a chance to make their peace, or well, whatever the antithesis of that is, usually involving the crook not breathing anymore. Kind of a blood for blood kind of thing. Sounds great at first, but I couldn't recommend it. I don't think it would go well in people's conscience. I don't know, not a good idea.
Number 7, Chiron. It wasn't just the gods who were cruel at random, but of course a lot of humans were just as susceptible, as well as psychopaths. Once there was a man named Chiron who loved to rob people, and his method would just call travelers on the road and ask them to help wash his feet. They would offer to help, and then he would kick them off the face of a cliff, 300 style. And if it wasn't any worse, a giant turtle would be at the bottom of the cliff and eat the remains of the still living, if the fall didn't kill them. And he did this over and over and over again, killing many people. The hero Theseus was really tired of his shenanigans, and so he confronted Chiron, and by karma he also threw him off the cliff, which many would say is a fitting end. Number 6, Athena punishes Arachne. Arachne was a wonderful and very talented seamstress, and she would sometimes boast that she was better than other people, and more importantly, better than the goddess Athena. Eventually this got to Athena's ear and cautioned her to be quiet of this false rumor, and when she didn't listen, Athena then challenged her and gave her one chance to prove herself in a weaving contest. Which is great because it shows that she wants to give her a chance, but when Athena saw how beautiful the tapestry Arachne made, she exploded in a fit of rage and jealousy and cursed the girl to feel guilty for what she had done. Arachne felt so much guilt that she eventually did take her own life, but Athena wasn't done with her yet. She took Arachne and transformed her into a spider so she would weave for all eternity, which we all know now in a scientific term for spiders is arachne. Number 5. Apollo Fin. For once, or at least once in a while, we see gods not behaving badly as much as we are told in stories they do. Apollo grew up in adulthood within 4 days, of course, because that's normal, on a small island and wasn't able to leave, and he decided, out of all sea creatures, to transform himself into a dolphin. This somehow turned into a sea into raging storms because apparently turning into a dolphin makes the sea mad. He spotted a ship in distress and he decided to save it, and he leapt up on the deck, still in dolphin form, and guided the ship to a safe place on the shore. From there he set up to do what gods do, and in honor of his method of escape, Apollo named the city Delphi after his dolphin form. Number 4. The 12 Laborers. The Laborers of Hercules, also known as the 12 Laborers, are amongst the most famous stories in Greek mythology. Hercules was given a series of tasks that seemed impossible to complete. However, through a combination of strength, wit, and assistance from the gods, Hercules was able to overcome these challenges and achieve redemption. The tasks range from slaying fearsome beasts like the Nemean lion and the 9-headed Hydra, to capturing mythical creatures like the Golden Hind of Artemis and the Erymanthian boar. Each of these tasks were fraught with danger and required not only immense physical strength, but also cleverness and bravery. In each case, Hercules was able to overcome the odds and complete his task by proving his heroism and earning his redemption. Number 3. Prometheus. Prometheus was a unique figure among the Titans. He was known for his wisdom and foresight, and he had a particular fondness for humanity, which set him apart from most of the other gods and Titans. This fondness led him to commit one of the most audacious acts in all of mythology. He stole fire from the gods and gave it to humanity. Fire in this context was more than just a practical tool. It represented knowledge, progress, and civilization. By giving fire to humans, Prometheus not only provided them with the means of survival, but also set them a path towards progress and enlightenment. But this angered Zeus, as he was enraged by Prometheus' audacity and the potential threat that enlightened humanity could pose to the gods. Prometheus was then chained to a rock in the Caucasus Mountains, and every day an eagle would swoop down and eat his liver. Each night his liver would regenerate and only be eaten again the next day. The cycle of torment was to be Prometheus' fate for eternity. If you watched the movie Moana, that's actually kind of how Maui came to be. It was that he was an eagle, and also he gave and stole the heart of Te Fiti to the people, and that's basically where the story came from. Number 2. Oedipus. Some may or may not know this story, so let's just get into it. Oedipus was the son of Lais, the king of Thebes, and his wife Jocasta, and before his birth, an oracle prophesied that Oedipus would kill his father and marry his mother. Horrified by this prophecy, Lais and Jocasta decided to kill their newborn son, and they ordered a servant to leave their baby on a mountainside to die. However, the servant took pity on the infant and gave him to a shepherd from the neighboring city of Corinth. The shepherd in turn gave the baby to the childless king and queen of Corinth, who raised them as their own. Unaware of who his real parents were, Oedipus decided to visit an oracle and heard the same prophecy his birth parents heard. Believing it was his adopted parents were his biological parents, he left to avoid the prophecy. But unfortunately, when he left, he encountered his real dad and killed him, unknowingly fulfilling the first half of the prophecy. He then arrived in Thebes, where he was able to defeat a sphinx, and as his reward, he became king and married the widow of that kingdom, in other words, his mom, fulfilling the rest of the prophecy. Number 1. Pygmalion. He was just really into mannequins, or in this case, statues. Pygmalion was a super talented sculptor from the island of Cyprus, and he saw how all the women around him had flaws. So he felt he wanted to make the perfect woman, so he made her from ivory, and with such skill, she almost seemed pretty much alive. And he named her Galatia, and just like that, he fell in love with his statue. He gave her everything: jewels, diamonds, silks to wear, but of course she was just a statue and could not give the love back to Pygmalion. So during the festival of Aphrodite, the goddess of love, he begged and prayed to have his wife just like the statue he made. Moved by his love and desire, she granted his wish, and just like the blue fairy from Pinocchio, she turned the statue into a real woman, and Galatia married Pygmalion, and they lived happily ever after.
Number 10 is a rocky time, because toilet paper didn't migrate its way over to Europe until the 16th century. Before, it was all sponge sticks and rocks, baby, and stones were actually a pretty common bathroom solution for the average Greek, who used rounded pieces alongside ceramics known as pissoi, which translated to pebbles. They kept a pile of these pebbles in their lavatories in some cute little Bed Bath & Beyond brand wicker baskets for whenever it was time to freshen up. And similar to how we have the phrase toilet paper doesn't grow on trees, they also had the saying to encourage a little frugality in the bathroom: 3 stones are enough to wipe. But my favorite fun fact is some of these pissoi sometimes originated as ostraka, the pieces of broken ceramic on which the Greeks of old inscribed the names of enemies. The ostraka were used to vote Big Brother style for some pain in the, well, you know what, to be thrown out of town, hence ostracized. Check out the Bumblebee video Top 10 Historical Laws That Defy Logic to learn all about this strange law and phenomena, and maybe subscribe to our Hive while you're at it to stay up to date on all our video releases. This creative recycling of ostraka as pissoi allowed you to quite literally wipe your on the name and representation of someone you hate. However, the downside is that ancient Greek society had immensely high case of hemorrhoids, so you win and you lose. Number 9 is red lip, pale face, and I'd say she was breathing in snowflakes too, but there wasn't any of that in ancient Greece. At least I don't think so. While nowadays there's a massive culture of skin tanning and darkening, but in olden times it was the opposite. It was pale, pale, pale. People wanted to look like chalk, loaves of Wonder Bread. The closer your complexion was to that of HP printer paper, the better. Even if it meant the Greeks would powder their entire bodies with lead to achieve it. Now that was around 200 BC, but thankfully by 1000 BC, they'd wisened up and realized rubbing poison over their entire body maybe wasn't the vibe. So instead, they mixed it with chalk, because you know, diluted poison isn't as bad as the full thing, and then they smeared that everywhere. At least it was less deadly. After achieving the visage of freshly prepared mayonnaise, Grecian gals would then mix up some red iron deposit powder with fat or wax and rub that on her lips. And now, ice that cake with mascara. Don't worry, it's only a mixture of egg whites, resin, and ammonia. You've now achieved the supernatural glam that doesn't make you look like the puppet from Saw at all. Number 8 is scrape it off. The ancient Greeks looked at bathing as aesthetic purposes first, actual hygiene second. Bathing wasn't to clean away dirt per se, rather to beautify the body. The Greeks did invent soap down the line, but prior to the advent of public baths in 600 BC, they started off using blocks of clay, sand, pumice, and ash that they'd rub away with olive oil after applying. The same oil that they'd then scrape off. This was done with a strigil. But that's okay. After 600 BC, you can always have a nice refreshing bath, right? Think again. Contrary to popular perception, not every city or village in ancient world had a public bath, or even if it did, they weren't always open to everyone. Even when they were in fashion, if you were from a lower class, the best you could expect would be scrubbing yourself with old impure olive oil that multiple people have already applied, scraped off, and returned to the same barrel for all poor people public use jug. If you were extra lucky, there would be a wash bowl, but then you'd be expected to share it, or even the water, with someone else.
Number 7, exile. A classic of the old world. Just like Hellenic society itself, a common punishment for a severe enough crime was banishment. Sure, today there's lots of folks who like being alone. I swear most of the people I went to high school with were introverts. I was friends with all of them. I don't know why though, because I'm so extroverted. For example, Heraclitus of Ephesus. He was getting banished from ancient Greece, and it's a lot different than not being invited to Chad's birthday party. However, getting banished back then could likely see you with nothing, like previously mentioned before. Maybe not as bad or down bad as previously mentioned, like Dionis, but still pretty rough. There were lots wrong with ancient cities, sure, but you were much safer in civilization than left outside of it back then. As someone who's seen a lot of Bear Grylls, I wouldn't recommend going out of the wild back then. A trip, fall, a cut, that's it. Whew. Number 6, the Brazen Bull. This one is a punishment and a crime. 2 in 1, baby. The Brazen Bull to many may just look like a statue, and worst case Ontario, maybe the horns are sharp and could hurt you. Maybe. But don't be fooled, friends. This is much more than a statue of bronze or brass colored bull. It's actually a perp cooker. It's a twisted, awful, rotten form of punishment that could also be a crime itself. One against humanity, and those are the worst ones. Basically, you open the hatch on the bull and throw your bad guy in. Then get a nice big fire going, really big one. The same ones your dad does in the summer. You know the ones that you can't even get too close to because it's too hot. Woo! Then, wait. Once steam or whatever horrible smelling vapors come through the bull's nose, that's when you know the perp is done and it's time to throw in another one. That's awful. What an awful way to go. Oh. Number 5, flaying. This is straight up a crime, man. I don't care what you say. This is just a crime against humanity. I'm not here debating on how governments get rid of their, let's say, more interesting members of society, but this is not it. Popular in the ancient world for whatever reason, and I can't stress this enough, I would faint from watching. I was shivering writing this. Seriously, it's the worst. This is the act where someone is skinned alive. They're held down and peeled back like a potato. There's multiple famous incidents like in art and mythology. I just don't know who sits there and one day and goes, you know what, this guy? Yeah, we gotta skin this guy. Let's just skin him. Let's cut him up. Let's go. Number 4, the eagle dropping turtle. Okay, here we are. Top of the food chain. We're in charge. I'd like to make the argument it's not the things we eat that puts us there, but it's the things we don't eat. Think of all the animals at your favorite local Chinese buffet. Well, we as humans have adapted so much that we can survive and choose not to be carnivores or eat certain animals. Where am I going with this? Well, despite us being number 1, sometimes the animal kingdom fights back. That's kind of how it works. Take Aeschylus Tantalus in 455 BC, for example, a philosopher who found himself being struck by an eagle dropping a turtle onto his head. Unfortunately, the injury was fatal. Since we're talking about Greeks and philosophy, let's bring in a little law here. This is good, you'll like this. Mens rea, actus rea. While the eagle certainly didn't know he was committing a crime, he still did do it. Sounds like someone needs to go to animal court. That's something they would probably do back then. I mean, they did in medieval times. They put animals on court, so why not back then? Number 3, Draco. No, not Malfoy. Not Draco Malfoy. I know you're all thinking it. That's what I thought too. Draco, the lawgiver of ancient Greece, was a man with modern solutions for their modern problems. He was asked to give a code of law to replace the very aged tribal feuding laws that still existed at the time. Commoners were shocked to find out that even trivial crimes could wind you up in the brazen bull, or not breathing anymore. However, the wealthy, of course, loved these laws and applauded Draco. Classic villain story. They really loved it, so much so that it was Draco's undoing. As the legend goes, Draco was buried in a small mountain of clothes, hats, and garments. He suffocated under the pile of compliments. The accidental fatality of the man who gave us strict laws that are fatal. So what do you charge? You get in trouble for undoing the guy that's supposed to undo? That's weird. I don't know. Number 2, Prometheus. Oh, mighty Prometheus, what wise knowledge of fire do you bring us today? The story of Prometheus is that of a very dark and tragic one. He was the god who gave humans fire, despite Zeus's wishes not to. Well, given Zeus's temper, he wasn't too pleased when he saw people grilling up their Slovaki. Love me some Slovaki, man. Naturally, Prometheus had to pay, so Zeus did something so awful to him, well, we still talk about it today. He had Prometheus chained to a rock where every day at the same time a large bird would come down and eat his innards, just come and just nom nom on his insides. Gross. Since he was a god, he had Wolverine-like healing abilities, but he wasn't immune to pain. It would still hurt. He'd heal every day, but it would hurt really, really bad. Number 1, Sisyphus. I think this one is relatable to everyone, including myself. Unless, of course, a large bird does rip your guts out from time to time, or you've been skinned alive, then that one's more relatable. I doubt that, though. Sisyphus was the king of Corinth and had cheated his meeting with the Grim Reaper one too many times. This made Zeus mad. So he sent in Sisyphus to push a boulder up a mountain forever. Every time he gets to the top, it just falls back down. And if that's not a metaphor for life, I don't know what is.
Fresh out of the oven, we are starting with literature and theater. It wasn't until around 670 BCE that Homer's epics, the Iliad and Odyssey, were finally written in text. Written literature wasn't an option prior to the time of Plato, so all story surviving was told verbally. Spoken literature and theater became naturally intertwined. Together, they presented fictional stories, real history, melodramas, whether on stage or from a grandparent's mouth. Greek theater began in the 6th century BCE in Athens with the performance of tragedy plays at religious festivals. These in turn inspired the genre of Greek comedy plays, and the two both became hugely popular to attend, and performances spread around the Mediterranean. They influenced Hellenistic and Roman theater as well. The works of playwrights like Sophocles and Aristophanes formed the foundation upon which modern theater is based. Meanwhile, it may seem like dialogue was always a part of literature, but it wasn't before a dude named Achilles introduced the groundbreaking revolutionary idea of characters maybe interacting with each other. Other theatrical devices like sarcasm were integrated in works of Sophocles' Oedipus the King. And speaking of stories and oral traditions, lessons learned teaching through story. Ancient Greece used stories of gods, goddesses, and their demigod children and the first of mankind as ways to subtly, or not so subtly, teach behavior, consequences, and ideally self-preservation. Being a mythopoetic culture, they transmitted most story through poetry. As mentioned previously, for a long time, if the everyday Greek person was to learn about anything, it would need to be through hearsay. Thus, stories bearing the most important lessons on cowardice, betrayal, war, and heresy were the most popular because they were the most memorable. The gods and goddesses acted as examples, paradigms, and models for good behavior. Obviously, this is super contradicting because 90% of their gods functioned off of bad behavior, such as disgraceful killings, theft, lying, harming others, abductions, but the playwrights, orators, and poets were encouraging the audiences to reflect upon the tales and consider the values and morality within them. The function of these myths, as most cultures, is to explain, unify, unify and order existence and experience. The myths dispel chaos. When faced with a conflict, the Greeks sought answers in these stories that they had heard and used as guides through life. They reveal a structure, order, and coherence, and meaning not otherwise evident without forcing one to reflect. Bam! Break that revelry. It ain't all poetic. Infidelity culture. Infidelity was a crime highly scandalized according to ancient Greek customs. So, for both men and women who were accused and found guilty, there were punishments that put folks through the ringer. Ancient Athenian law had a set of 3 laws, the Miochia. The first of these prohibited a man from living with an adulterous wife and an adulterous wife from taking part in public religious ceremonies. The second exempted a man who had killed his wife or partner caught in the act. And the third protected an accused male adulterer from illegal imprisonment or death, but only if the woman he had slept with was a working girl. Ancient Greece was super for the boys. But yeah, you could go to jail, get stoned, be exiled. A classic was also having a peeled ginger root or radish shoved up your nether orifices, causing an intolerable burning sensation and agony. If it was enforced as capital punishment, the ginger radish chosen would be dry, rough, and lumpy so as to cause death by internal hemorrhaging. Fun! Speaking of, number 7 is sweat sales. So unlike the poor, who scraped oil off into a container and reused it over and over until it eventually became sludge, or the rich, who could use oil once and then just toss it out, athletes of Greece would scrape their oils off into special little containers. It's the same with their actual sweat to be sold. Sweat could easily be collected with a strigil the same as oils, and it would carry the dead skin cells and grime with it. This was called goilos, and the servants or athletes themselves would be expected to harvest it for people of Greece to do all sorts of weird things with it. These scrapings would then be sold as medicine, beauty products, perfume, you name it. People would rub the sweat of athletes on their skin, believing it to calm aches and pains, which it probably didn't do particularly well. If nothing else though, the Greek people, after rubbing some sweat and dirt on their skin, got to smell like an Olympian and enjoy some of the youthful vigor of the young men it came off of. At the same time, the gyms themselves would cash in on their users' bodily fluids and would often scrape their walls and floors for extra good, then invite companies to bid on the bottles of sweat. So the next time you're at the gym and you get off that machine and you leave that fresh layer of you-do where your back used to be, wipe that crap off before someone harvests it and sells it like a freak. Number 6 is mystery creams. I only call them that because it's a mystery why they'd ever want to use these products as creams. I want to know who woke up one day and slapped some crocodile crap on their face. How did they figure out that this was a skincare thing? Someone had to be the first. I like to think that person fell in it, woke up the next day looking radiant, but whatever. Yeah, so crocodile dung was a big part of Grecian life because so were the animals, but it was far from being a nuisance. Vain folks saw this as an opportunity, and the croc dung became part of many recipes for effective skincare treatment. This is face masks, contraceptive, hair masks, feet soaks. Hell, one recommendation for treating scars or crow's eyes around the eyes was by applying a little crocodile dung as eyeshadow. To quote a Greek medical document, levigate the dung of the land crocodile with water and anoint. If they have the means and the monies, people might even also have a whole dung bath in order to feel rejuvenated. I feel like that last one might have been a bit much, and considering the story of the ancient Greek philosopher Hercules, I am not far off in that opinion. Afflicted by swollen skin, he decided the best course of action would be some dung therapy. He buried himself in warm dung and mud in order to treat his condition. However, he stayed in the pile too long and ended up overheating and dying. Number 5 is some hair-raising standards. As you can probably guess from looking at the statues and other works of art they left behind, the ancient Greeks weren't a big fan of bodily hair. For them, the ideal body, especially for women, was smooth like a dolphin all over. Naturally, in a time before Gillette razors and shea butter shave cream, 'twas not that simple. Since they didn't have modern waxing solutions or even razors, despite making the strigil, which if they'd sharpened even a little, could have been made for the perfect razor/hedge trimmer. So the simplest way of achieving the beauty ideal was to simply pluck out individual hairs one by one. A painful, not to mention time-consuming process for your legs alone. Imagine trying to do that around back when mirrors haven't been invented yet. Fancy a swifter solution? Well, how about burning all your body hair off? Also the custom in ancient Greece. Best part of that, a lot like today, is if you don't keep up with the societal expectation of shaving, you'd receive a lot of disapproval and discomfort from others. But unlike today, as stated, it was a lot harder for them to shave, so the fact that expectation was there is insane. This is all about the power balance of the sexes, however, as respectable women's ritualistic deletion of her natural state attests to the male supremacy over his objectified wife. While he has his manhood intact, she must deplete her womanhood womanhood and thus alter her innate form so as to uphold the classical ideal. Somehow that didn't apply to eyebrows though. No. Those had to be like full Frida Kahlo experience. The Greeks wanted their ladies' eyebrows to look like a push broom on their damn forehead. In case you ain't picking up what I'm putting down, unibrows were all the rage. Even if you couldn't get to grow one, you could always draw some in. Number 4 is the bush, a favorite of the 70s and of ancient times. Historically, ancient Greek men have had an absolutely fascinating relationship with their down there hair and how they cultivate it. The styles of trimming and manscaping changing for centuries in the overtures of cultural change. In the classic period, the trimming and even shaping, yes, shapes like a heart or a sparkle or a loaf of bread, I don't know, I'm just spitballing, were done on a men's down there. Naturally, this was easiest and most elaborately done by aristocrats, while the poor and common men did more basic triangles or squares or whatever you can do, I don't know. Anyways, by modifying his natural state down there, a man can remove himself from the realm of ordinary man. I mean, think about it. Natural down there growth equalizes every man post-P, but the aristocrat elevates himself with this shaven distinction, idealizing its subject as a man more sophisticated than one who possesses unruly and uncontrollable tough. However, during the Tyrannicides revolt, Greek artisans started repping the au naturel in challenge to this. In general, the artistic representation of pubic hair became more naturalistic, abandoning the archaic array of wildly shaven flourishes for simpler and subtler trim jobs. The Greek state began to show that it valued the average citizen with both its institution of democracy and, by extension, its more naturalized rendering of down there hair. The increasingly liberated down there hair on the mid-5th century masculine sculptures exemplifies this development. The ancient Greeks continued to fluctuate through down there hairstyles afterwards, and their paper trail, or perhaps hair trail, isn't subtle either. Sculptors throughout centuries mark these changes, as does scholarly works such as Asteriophanes' Listatria. Number 3 is teeth cleaners. Gotta get your chomper squeaky clean somehow, and back in ancient Greece, you had a few options. First off, powders would be made as toothpaste, and these would be substances like lum, ashes, clay, peppermint, propolis, fennel seeds, cardamom seeds, and a magic substance called mastic. Mastic is also a resin that's a strong antiseptic. They also added abrasives like sand and crushed bones. These powders would be applied to a thin, dampened cloth, string, or twigs, all of which would be then used to rub, buff, and shine in between and on the teeth. By the time of the Roman Empire, the elites had actual servants whose job it was to clean others' teeth, and you could visit them and pay for a wash job. Now, to address the whole urine mouthwash thing, we've all heard about it at some point. It's true, but it's not. It's not like the Greeks were gargling the early morning dark yellow. They were adding derived properties from urine to their toothpaste. So that brings us to number 2, which is the uses of urine. Similar to how you can harvest salt from water, you can collect important acidic properties from processing urine. This is still awful and gross, but only because in modern times we're a lot more squeamish to concepts like that. In fact, people back then weren't even unaware that it was kind of crazy. The poet Tantalus once mocked his clean-toothed enemy Egnatius, who, to quote him, has shiny white teeth and grins forever everywhere. If he is in court when the council excites tears, he grins. If he be at a funeral pyre where one mourns a son devoted, where bereft mother's tears stream for her only son, he grins. Whatever it may be, wherever he is, whatever may happen, he grins. And he curses him out by saying to him that the higher the polish on your teeth, the more it proclaims that you have drank your piss. The Roman Emperor Vespasian famously instated a urine tax by taxing the public bins where people dumped urine collected from toilets. The tax was so lucrative that it was continued by his successor Titus. The collected pee was then sold as an ingredient to businesses, workshops, and tanneries, which subsequently were taxed for it. These businesses used it for tanning leather, producing soaps, refining tooth products, making medicine, making elixirs, and more. Ammonia, urine's key ingredients, was used by launderers to get stains out of clothes, and even farmers used it as fertilizer to grow the perfectly acidic fruits. Number 1 is Aunt Flo. It's been determined that there's a good possibility that women back then had fewer periods and lighter bleeding in ancient Greece than we do now in modern times, just because of diet, climate, and biological changes over history. But weirdly, the expectation was that they would actually bleed very heavily and regularly, and if they didn't, then remedies needed to be used to bring out the blood. Aristotle mentions menstruation being like the flow of blood from a sacrificial animal that must be maintained. As for stopping the flow once it started, the ancient Greeks took after the Egyptians, using a small wooden splint as the tampon base, then wrapping wools and linens around it before cramming it on in. Reusable pads were also made of layering cottons and wools that can be easily separated and washed later. Just remember not to wear any white in the hot Mediterranean sun while you're quite literally on the rag.